part of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
Hello, Tennessee Valley. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator, Adam Keller, and we are broadcasting live, online, and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley in the Spice Radio studio in Huntsville, Alabama. Today, Arkansas creeps and North Carolina thieves in Boss Watch. The UAW reviews Stellantis' proposals. Ivey says Alabamians are lazy. We talk to Social Security workers about their recent contract. All that and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show, we've got a phone number, but the line is not open. I apologize. We have too much to get to today, but you can still text us at 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857, and we might respond to your text message on the air. Additionally, if you're listening to us on the radio, we are live on YouTube. So you can head over to YouTube and join us in the chat, and we can see you, and we might respond to that as well. There's also a bunch of people in the chat already, like Stidham Family Gospel, who says, UAW strong. If you're a gospel group, you should send me a message and some of your work, because I love gospel. Little known fact about Jacob, I love gospel music, some of my favorite. So if you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio today, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, because believe it or not, we do stuff through the week. We tweet, very good tweets. We Facebook, very good Facebooks. And
everyone's saying it.
Everyone's saying it. Everyone's saying it. And Adam does a show on Thursday mornings called Shop Talk. So we got stuff going on throughout the week, so you can find us anywhere you find anything online. You're going to want to bookmark our website, TVLR.fm, for new articles. You're going to want to sign up for our newsletter so we can let you know when new stuff happens. Just a reminder, your support is what keeps us on the air, folks. Our largest single source of donors comes directly from our listeners. We get more money from our listeners than any other of our union sponsors. Okay, so that's very, very important, and we could not do it without y'all. And for those of you that are donating, we appreciate it so much. I do want to make that clear. We're very appreciative. And for those of you who have not begun donating to the show yet, I hope you consider it, because it takes money to do this. Adam and I work on this volunteer, but the people who do this behind the scenes, we want to pay them, and we do pay them, and we pay them at least $20 an hour. And so it takes money to do that. And additionally, it takes money to get on the radio. We pay for the airtime on the commercial radio stations that we're on, because we believe that it is worthwhile to reach just random working people who have the radio on that station and are going to hear us for an hour and a half every Saturday morning instead of, anti-worker drivel. So if you think that's worthwhile, then please do consider supporting us at tvlr.fm/donate. You can also buy our merch. We have a new shirt on pre-order. You can get that, tvlr.fm/store. Pre-orders are going to end on that pretty soon here in the next couple of weeks. So you're going to want to get in on that. And if you're a member of a union, then please do think about getting your local to sponsor the show, to run some ads on our program, to make a donation, something like that, because it really takes it all. It takes our listeners donating $1, $2, $3, $5, $10, $20 a month, and it takes unions sponsoring the show. We could not do it without both of those pieces. It's all very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just, again, want to thank everybody who does contribute to the show, everyone who donates, everyone who listens and shares. Whatever you do to contribute, it really is appreciated because this is a collective effort. I do want to add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Unclaimed Mysteries Internet Radio, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out. And as most of you know, but if you're new, maybe you don't, we are not media professionals. We're just a few diehard unionists who believe that Alabama and the South's labor movement and working class deserve a bigger platform. So we're really hoping this project can make a difference on that front. And again, we can't do it without you. So thank you for spending some time with us this morning.
And we really do appreciate you spending time with us this morning. Infinite Content, I got your tweet. I don't know if we're going to be able to react to it. I didn't see the tweet until we were basically already about to go live. And we have a lot of stuff that we already have to react to in overtime. So we'll see. I'll check it out during one of the breaks, but I'm not sure that we're going to be able to get to it. Crappy, vote no on the contracts. We appreciate everybody in the Teamsters that work for UPS tuning in. Penelope, good morning. Finally getting to watch live today. Appreciate that. And Penelope, I remember you telling me that your granddaughter was going to be in a production of the Newsies. So if you want to call in at some point or leave us a voicemail, let us know how that goes. We would be super interested. And Billy's Mini Willie, CWA local 81250 tuning in. Thank you, Billy's Mini Willie.
Shout out CWA.
Shout out CWA, that's right. So it's time for Boss Watch, folks. That is the segment where we take a look at bosses breaking the law, which they do every week, all the time. In fact, bosses break the law more often than working people, but they don't go to prison for it, funny enough. But we do. If we break the law, we're going to go to prison, but not your boss. So let's see what bosses were up to across the South this week. In North Carolina, a Durham construction services contractor, R&R Construction Maintenance of North Carolina, stole more than $800,000 from its employees. Ooh. $800,000. Can you imagine? They would put me under the jail if I stole $750,000. Under the jail, that's where I would go. So this contractor was forced to pay back wages along with an equal amount in damages to the 188 affected workers by the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of North Carolina in 2022. And this is being announced today because finally, almost at the end of 2023, the U.S. Department of Labor has finally recovered the stolen money. So the workers now finally have the money back. The back wages and the damages from the contractor. This theft occurred because the company denied workers minimum wage and overtime wages, and the workers were misclassified as independent contractors. Heading over to Arkansas, we have a couple of creeps. The EEOC alleges that Simply Slims in Hot Springs, Arkansas, violated federal law when it subjected a class of teenagers, and young adults to sexual harassment and a sexually hostile work environment. According to the EEOC's lawsuit, a shift manager made inappropriate sexual comments to a young female. The young female immediately reported the comments to the general manager. While receiving notice of the sexual harassment, the company failed to address the harassment, and the shift manager continued to harass other young female employees, including teenagers. Wow. Here's what he did. The shift manager would brush up against the girls intentionally. He would rub their shoulders, poke them in inappropriate places. He fondled the breast of one young female, touched one on her bottom, and placed his hand on the inner thigh of another. Eventually, the sexual harassment forced several of the employees to resign. You do this stuff out of the workplace and you go to jail, right? If you do it inside the workplace, you're going to get a slap on the wrist. It's insane. The laws in this country are wild. Such alleged conduct violates Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits sexual harassment in the workplace. The EEOC filed suit in the U.S. District Court of the Western District of Arkansas after first attempting to reach a pre-litigation settlement through conciliation process. The suit seeks monetary relief in the form of back pay, compensatory and punitive damages, compensation for lost benefits, and an injunction against future discrimination. Slim Chickens is a fast casual restaurant specializing in wings, tenders, sandwiches, and wraps headquartered in Fayetteville, Arkansas. It has over 200 locations.
Wow.
Crazy
Nobody
stuff.
should ever have to deal with that. Certainly not in the workplace.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Let's head it over to Alabama, where there's a story from June that we missed, where federal workplace safety inspectors determined the operator of a southern Alabama tire shop could have prevented a 45-year-old mechanic's fatal injuries by following required safety standards. An investigation by the U.S. Department of Labor's Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, found the tire service mechanic and an apprentice had just inflated a tractor tire after mounting it on its rim at Neil Tyndall Tire, LLC in Opp, Alabama, on January the 18th of 2023, when seconds later the tire exploded as the mechanic leaned over to unhook the air compressor's hose. The tire then struck the mechanic before flying upward, where it broke through the ceiling and landed on the roof.
Good Lord.
And it killed him. The OSHA inspectors learned the air compressor the two workers used had been set to inflate the tire at 110 pounds per square inch of pressure when the tire that exploded had a maximum load carrying capacity of 35 pounds of pressure per square inch, over 3 times the maximum capacity. The agency determined that the tire shop allowed employees to inflate tires on single-piece rim wheels without using a required restraining device or a barrier for protection against tire explosion. In addition, OSHA cited the company for exposing workers to struck-by hazards by allowing workers to remain in an unsafe area while inflating tires, and for failing to prevent workers from inflating tires above the manufacturer's maximum recommended pressure. And here's the penalty for this. And this is important because, we had a conversation over a year ago with some bosses here in Huntsville. And you can find it on our channel. I think the title of the clip is Adam and Jacob explain labor law to two bosses for 2 hours, something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was. But they talked about how, I have to take so much risk because I'm an employer, because if anything happens to my employees, I could go to jail, which is almost universally not true. It's just a lie. Or, these are young people. They probably don't know. That's probably just what the other bosses that they're learning from told them. So they're probably not lying when they say that. They're just misinformed. They don't know anything about the law. Here's what Neil Tyndall Tire LLC faced for killing a man. A proposed penalty of $14,511. Neil Tyndall Tire LLC has been operating in Opp, Alabama since 1998, specializing in the distribution, sale, and installation of new and used tires for cars, pickups, semi-trucks, and tractors. The company has a 440,000 square foot tire storage warehouse. Heading over to Texas, where Mewburn Oil Company has agreed to pay a $5.5 million penalty for illegal pollution in New Mexico and Texas, and undertake projects expected to cost at least $4.6 million to ensure 422 of its oil and gas well pads in New Mexico and Texas comply with state and federal clean air regulations and offset past illegal emissions. These terms, here's what it's for. They're in settlement of claims alleged in a civil complaint filed by the EPA and the New Mexico Energy Department that alleges that at more than 100 of its oil and gas production operations in New Mexico and Texas, the company Mewburn failed to obtain required state and federal permits and they failed to capture and control air emissions from storage vessels, and failed to comply with inspection, monitoring, and record-keeping requirements. The EPA and the New Mexico Environmental Department identified the alleged violations through field investigations and repeated flyover surveillance conducted in 2019, 2020, and 2022. Muburn's actions taken pursuit to the deal will eliminate more than 11,000 tons of harmful pollutants from the air each year. And these pollutants are in relation to volatile organic compounds, VOCs. And those VOCs are a component in the formation of ground-level ozone, which irritates the lungs, exacerbates diseases such as asthma, and can increase susceptibility to respiratory illnesses, such as pneumonia and bronchitis. So this isn't just like emission stuff. This is stuff that is going to kill people, going to severely decrease their quality of life. And in addition, a co-benefit of these reductions, which are going to total 11,000 tons. Today's settlement is going to eliminate 11,000 tons of harmful air pollutants. The Principal Deputy Assistant Administrator Larry Starfield of the EPA's Office of Enforcement and Compliance Assurance, that's how much harmful air pollutants is going to be reduced by these orders. In addition, as a co-benefit, the consent decree will result in significant reductions of greenhouse gas emissions, including reducing methane, which is a powerful greenhouse gas. 1,300 tons of annual methane reductions equates to more than 33,000 tons of carbon dioxide. And eliminating the release of this amount of methane per year is similar to eliminating the annual use of 3.4 million gallons of gasoline. So very important thing happening over in Texas. Here's the final story that we're going to dig into. Amazon lying, which is not an uncommon occurrence.
Wow. You don't say.
Story from Vice Motherboard. And Adam, you know how Amazon claims that actually Amazon drivers are not employees of Amazon.
Right.
They're employees of contractors that Amazon contracts with. So they're not Amazon's employees. They're like Delivery Service Professional Incorporated's employees. And they're not a joint employer. And specifically, this is actually literally what they said in an email to a reporter about their reporting about their treatment about these drivers. They said, quote, "These drivers are not Amazon drivers, actually, but drivers who deliver for Amazon," which is a very critical factual difference.
Interesting. Yeah.
And, that distinction is, in fact, important because if it is true that these Amazon drivers are not, in fact, Amazon employees, then that means that Amazon is not a joint employer and therefore does not have to bargain with these employees if they elect to unionize. However, if Amazon is lying, which they are, let's be honest, it would mean that under the law, they would be mandated to bargain with drivers that unionize. And, while it may seem obvious that Amazon is a joint employer to its delivery drivers, considering that Amazon dictates literally every aspect of the job, we have another piece of evidence directly from Amazon themselves, which is that they spent over $160,000 last year on anti-union consultants specifically to dissuade drivers that work for their contractors from unionization. Now, if they aren't their employees, then why does Amazon care if they unionize or not? That's pretty strange.
Right.
Trying to influence another company's employees in their decision to unionize, that's strange behavior for an uninterested party. So there we go, folks. That's Boss Watch. We do have a few dishonorable mentions. Aurora Pro Services, a North Carolina-based residential home service and repair company, has agreed to pay $50,000 and provide other relief to settle a religious harassment, discrimination, and retaliation lawsuit brought because all employees were made to attend a daily employer-led Christian prayer meeting and reprimanded employees who did not attend up to and actually including termination for employees who did not want to pray with their boss. Wild stuff happening in North Carolina. The EEOC announced a lawsuit against HCA Healthcare Incorporated, which is a for-profit corporation headquartered in Nashville, because they violated federal law by refusing to promote an employee because of his age, race, and national origin, and fired him in retaliation for complaining internally to his employer about the discrimination. The EEOC also announced a lawsuit against Silver Bay Seafood Restaurant Incorporated because they violated a federal law when it subjected a female employee to a sexually hostile work environment. Specifically, she alleges she was continually sexually harassed and touched. The U.S. Department of Labor recovered a little over $7,000 for one worker illegally fired for his protected use of family and medical leave by his employer, Home 2 Suites in Shreveport, Louisiana. Here's one we missed from April. The Williams companies agreed to a settlement that requires them to pay $3.75 million civil penalty and spend an estimated $8.5 million to come into compliance after the companies violated leak detection and repair requirements in federal, state, and tribal clean air laws, resulting in excess emissions of VOCs. We just talked about that earlier. Those lead to serious public health concerns, including respiratory illnesses, aggravation of existing heart disease, and exacerbation of asthma. Young children and the elderly are especially sensitive to these impacts, and this affects natural gas processing plants owned by this company across the South, including in Alabama, Louisiana, Arkansas, West Virginia, and Texas. The EPA issued a proposed denial to Alabama's permit program to manage coal combustion residuals after they identified deficiencies in the Alabama Department of Environmental Management's permits, with closure requirements for unlined service impoundments, groundwater monitoring networks, and corrective action requirements. The EPA discussed these issues with ADEM. However, the state agency has not revised its permits or supplemented its application to explain how such permits are as protective as the federal requirements. Under federal regulations, surface impoundments cannot be closed if, once closure is complete, the coal ash continues to be saturated by groundwater. Facilities must prevent groundwater from infiltrating and flowing out of the closed unit to prevent additional groundwater contamination. In contrast, Alabama does not require that groundwater infiltration be adequately addressed during the closure of these coal ash units, so they have to follow federal law. And finally, the U.S. Department of Labor announced today that its Mine Safety and Health Administration, MSHA, will extend the public comment period on proposed amendments to existing federal standards that protect the nation's miners from health hazards related to workplace exposure of respirable crystalline silica, or silica dust. They have extended the public comment period through September the 11th. So get your comments in support of our country's coal miners not dying of black lung.
That's right.
We're going to head to a break. On the other side, we should have we got the Social Security workers in the Zoom yet?
We sure do.
We sure do. So we're going to take a break really quick, and we're going to be right back talking to representatives of the Social Security Administration's employees about a new contract that they just negotiated with the Social Security Administration. Folks, we'll be right back. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and family members are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough even to keep their jobs. We can fix this. It's time for us to find a way to close the health care coverage gap so that people can remain at work. Let's make this a priority. Let's close this gap and cover Alabama. To learn more and how you can help, visit coveralabama.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law, the name with proven results.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morris, and my co-host is Adam Keller. We're broadcasting live from the Spice Radio studio in Huntsville, Alabama, online and on the radio. We just finished up going through Boss Watch. If you miss any part of the show, don't forget that you can go to our YouTube page and rewind and check it out. You can also find us wherever you listen to your podcasts, where we upload the first half of the show every Tuesday morning at 5 a.m. Second half of the show goes up on every Thursday morning at 5 a.m. Thanks again to everybody in the chat. Will joined us, DL Cindero and Sind Nanda, and Notori Lee. Thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate it. 36 people watching and 13 likes on YouTube. We can get those numbers up, I think. Also, if you're watching and you haven't subscribed, please consider doing that. And if you're a regular listener and you have the funds, then do consider donating to the show, becoming a monthly recurring automatic donor at tvlr.fm/donate. All right, so like I said before we went to the break, we are going to be talking about the new contract negotiated by the American Federation of Government Employees and the Social Security Administration, which is going to cover 42,000 Social Security employees nationwide. And these new workplace rights and protections, they are really, really, really cool. Just a couple of them here. You know, there's going to be new allowances for temporary compassionate assignments for a temporary personal situation outside of their control, like illness of a parent. I know this is something that my family's actually going through right now. My grandmother had a stroke or had 2 strokes now. And so we're having to care for her. And you know, it's been like difficult on our family that has to work. And so being able to kind of change your situation at work for a while, really, I can personally now understand how beneficial that's going to be to these members. There's going to be more funds for emergency backup care. There's going to be more protections for mothers who need to breastfeed. Lots of cool stuff. We're going to dig into it a little bit more with Rich Kuchar. He is the president of the AFGE Council 220, which represents Social Security Administration workers. Rich, thanks for talking to us on the program today.
Hey, thanks for having me. And, best wishes to you and your family and your grandmother for a speedy recovery.
I appreciate it. I really do. Before we jump into this contract, I guess, can you talk to us about what the employees that you represent do? Because, I think that there's a lot of people there's just, for anything in our society, actually, if you've never actually done the work or you've never watched people do the work, you can't appreciate how much work goes into certain things. And one example that I've been pointing to lately for that is shows like concerts and stuff. The Stagehands Union in Huntsville, they're the exclusive labor provider for the Orion Amphitheater and the VBC. We have a bunch of big concerts. And and I was able to go through a walkthrough with the union as they were setting up for a Fish concert one time. And there was, like 50, 60, 70 people running around a day or two before the concert even began. It's amazing how much work goes into stuff like that. And so I'm positive that there's a similar situation going on in the Social Security Administration. Can you talk to us about what your members do?
Sure. We have a very diverse agency, both demographically speaking and also in the nature of the work that we perform. My folks, I'm actually president of Council 215, 215. And my particular part of the agency represents employees in our hearing offices and our appeals council installations nationwide. And so by the time my constituents get involved in the claims process would be after the initial 2 steps of disability claims primarily, where they would go through the field office employees who are represented by Council 220. They would, file their disability applications. There'd be a disability determination made on those claims. And if they happen to be denied or they disagree with the decision in any way at the first 2 steps, the initial step and the reconsideration step, then they have the right under the law to a hearing before an administrative law judge of Social Security. And so my colleagues in the hearing offices, we are the support staff for those ALJs. So we'll do all the case work up before the hearing. We'll assist in scheduling the hearing, review the cases for the judge prior to the hearing, and then draft a decision for the judge after the hearing, along with other sort of post-hearing workloads. And so that's who I represent. Now, I touched upon the field offices. They're the primary point of contact, or one of the 2 main primary points of contact that the American public would have with Social Security. Everything from getting a Social Security card taken care of to filing a retirement, a survivors, a disability application with a claims specialist, dealing with representative payee issues when somebody's not capable of handling their own funds and they need a responsible family member or other third party to manage their benefits for them. All of that type of work is addressed at the field office. And so there's about over 1,200 field offices nationwide. And so that is, again, one of the 2 main points of contact that virtually every American would have with this agency. The other being our 800 number, our teleservice centers. You call our 800 number, you're going to be talking to one of our bargaining unit employees who's going to try to assist you. Unfortunately, under some fairly onerous circumstances, given our staffing situation and the expectations that the agency has with production on the calls. So We in addition to that, we have about 8 payment centers nationwide, 2 at headquarters, and then the other 6 all over the country that are represented by Council 109 and Local 1923 in Baltimore, a data operations center in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and then quality review offices located in the regional offices nationwide. So we have. We're all over the country. As you noted, we're over 42,000 bargaining unit employees strong. And, the nature of the work that we do is, again, very diverse, as is our workforce.
Right. And so you were the chief negotiator for this round of negotiations. What were some of what were your biggest priorities, the things that you wanted to accomplish for your members going into these negotiations?
So I think for your benefit and the benefit of the listeners, I want to back up to 2018 because that's when all the fun started. And I'm being sarcastic in saying it was fun. Memorial Day weekend. So our contract, our 2012 national agreement expired in December of 2017, and the agency under the last administration had signaled to us that they were very interested in reopening the contract and going through full-term negotiations. And, we began preparing for those negotiations almost as if we were under normal circumstances. Memorial Day weekend 2018, the last administration had issued 3 anti-union, anti-employee executive orders that were geared towards curtailing, if not outright gutting, the rights of federal employees to have union representation, effective union representation, as well as certain due process and procedural rights that they would have with respect to issues such as, performance cases and disciplinary matters. And so we saw this as an outright attack on our existence as federal sector labor organizations and, on very, very dearly held rights that we have as federal employees. To representation in the workplace and to some basic fundamental due process in the way that management addresses alleged performance issues and disciplinary problems. And so, we had to retool and really try to address this fundamental attack, almost as if we were building the plane in midair. The agency came in, SSA came in very hot. Their proposals were some of the most draconian rollbacks of these rights that I've ever seen. I mean, under normal circumstances, management is keen to, make proposals out of left field to try to, curtail these sorts of rights, but they aren't truly serious proposals under normal circumstances.
Right.
The agency's initial proposals with respect to representational time, with respect to performance, with respect to discipline, with respect to access to union representatives on site during the workday, were some of the most egregious proposals I had ever seen. I mean, they were akin to science fiction, and not good science fiction like Star Trek. So, they wanted a truncated negotiation schedule of only 4 months, where we would meet 2 weeks a month for the course of 4 months. And if we weren't, if we did not reach an agreement by that point, as you know, or you may be aware, federal employees are not allowed to strike. PATCO, we're governed by the same law that Reagan used to wipe out PATCO. Right. And so we're not allowed to strike. And when we reach a bargaining impasse, our employer can't lock us out and we can't withhold our labor. And so a third-party panel of 7 individuals that is selected entirely by the president and is not subject to, to my, as I speak right now, to my knowledge, not subject necessarily to confirmation. They're allowed to, there's no requirement for partisan or ideological balance. And so what normally happens under a Republican administration is that a Republican president will pick management-friendly panel members. And in a Democratic administration, because the Democrats like fairness, Um, they'll try to strive for some type of balance between the two poles. And
isn't that funny? I just want to just take a second to think about that, you know, because this happens all the time. When Democrats get in, they try to do this like, oh, we want to appear fair and balanced and not too. We don't want to be too pro-worker, right? And so they'll appoint bosses and workers, whereas Republicans will they'll just do management side people. I mean, you know, that's just it's a funny kind of lack of symmetry.
I agree, 100%. And you know, the GOP generally looks at these situations and say, we're going to do what we want because we won. Right. We feel we have a mandate, and there isn't that symmetry or that you know, that there isn't a reciprocal offsetting sentiment by the Democratic Party when they get into power. Although the current impasses panel is better than most. However, you know, my general feeling is the impasses panel is not necessarily the place that a federal sector union goes for justice. Right. And what the Trump administration had done was it was management friendly on steroids. They had picked not just management friendly, you know, law professors or management side labor attorneys. They picked union busters. I mean, and it was the most hostile panel that we had ever seen. And so, you know, under these circumstances where they immediately gutted our representational time, immediately removed our ability to access employees at the work site through these executive orders, you know, unilaterally rewrote parts of our prior term agreement because it had expired and they felt they had the right to do so. We were then going into negotiations with both hands tied behind our back, and it really revealed, you know, not just to those of us at Social Security, but also I think the federal sector, the labor movement in general, just how vulnerable we were politically and legally to a change in administration, and particularly to an administration that was hostile to the very existence of federal sector union rights. And so you know, where we ended up going was, you know, trying to preserve as much as we could. It certainly wasn't a situation where, you know, the entire federal sector labor relations apparatus was arrayed against us. And what I mean by that was, and I just kind of went into the Federal Service Impasses panel that would break the bargaining impasse, but the Federal Labor Relations Authority, or FLRA, which is the federal sector analog to the National Labor Relations Board, there was a 2 Republican, 1 Democrat composition, so obviously it was an anti-worker majority, but they curiously had no general counsel. And under their interpretation of their internal rules and regulations, they felt that if they didn't have a confirmed or proper general counsel in place, they were not in a position to issue complaints in unfair labor practice charges.
Interesting.
And so we had an entire venue shut down to us. And so we couldn't go to the FLRA for justice. The panel certainly was not a place where we could go for justice. And so, you know, my union at the national level, other federal sector unions had filed lawsuits against the executive orders that resulted in late August of 2018, an injunction against any action taken by subordinates of the president, i.e. federal agencies, to take any steps to implement the more draconian provisions of those executive orders. And interestingly enough, the judge in that case is now Justice Brown Jackson on the Supreme Court. So, you know, we went through this very rapid fire negotiation process in 2018 and into 2019, where, you know, the agency was taking this very scattershot approach to negotiations because they wanted to be able to say with a straight face, we talked about all the contract articles, therefore, and we're not getting an agreement, therefore we need to be released to go to the impasses panel. And ultimately, that's what happened in December of 2018 and into January of 2019. We found ourselves in front of this hostile impasses panel that did follow through on the, you know, threats made by the administration, the last administration. We found our representational time cut. and gutted. We found ourselves removed from federal office work sites in terms of union offices and the like. Performance rights we were able to hold on to some degree. They wanted to, what the agency and the administration wanted to do at that time was foreclose the grievance procedure and the arbitration process to performance cases and severe disciplinary cases. They wanted everything to go to what's called the Merit Systems Protection Board, which is, again, not a very, it's not known for being an employee-friendly body. It's highly legalistic. It's not the less formal environment that you would see in a grievance procedure. And we were fortunately able to hold on to those rights because there was very clear precedent in the DC circuit that if you're going to try to take those rights away and avoid having a broad scope grievance process, that you have to have a good, solid business justification for doing so. And, our argument was SSA can't make that case. They've never even proffered any evidence to that point. And so it was one of the few things that we were able to hold on to in that environment. But we found our telework rights were eliminated. And as I said, they made our ability to represent our workforce tremendously harder as a result of the executive orders and the bargaining posture. And so why I wanted to get into all that background is because you asked about our priorities. We have been clawing back, almost negotiating or renegotiating this term agreement in a piecemeal fashion through settlement of litigation, which we got to restore our prior representational rights under the last agreement, and then to renegotiate parts of the contract that really went to very important issues involving employee rights and work-life balance and those sorts of things, as well as trying to find a way to better work with agency executives to simply get things done, both to improve working conditions and improve public service outside of the context of the traditional collective bargaining system, which even under President Biden has not been the easiest road to travel. And we're not the only agency that's been in that boat. It has been fairly universal across the federal government and other federal agencies that even though President Biden has referred to himself as the most pro-union president in American history, and I think FDR might have a better claim to that, such as it is. But, even though he's touted himself as the most pro-union president in American history, that feeling, that sentiment, that vision hasn't filtered down into federal agencies in the way that we would have liked to have seen, especially since he rescinded the Trump orders within the first 48 hours of his administration.
Again, brother, I could not agree with you more. That's just another kind of asymmetry that you see, because like as soon as Republicans get in office, they try to do everything that they can to take away worker power within the federal service, and it's just and part of it is that it's just kind of difficult to. It is difficult to rebuild. Like it's easy to knock stuff down, right? But it kind of takes a little bit more time to rebuild, and so that's one reason. But I do think there's just a lack of urgency with this. Allowing the NLRB to continue to not be funded properly through the Biden administration. They got a 10% increase in the last fiscal year, which only kept up with inflation. Right? And that's after they had been flat funded since 2014. It's just there's a whole lot more that I think that we could be getting and that federal workers deserve, and that, like you said, would be to the benefit of the people, the American public that we serve. Because when you have workers that are taken care of, that are comfortable, that can have a good middle class life and be secure in their jobs, they're going to be able to perform better. And we saw that over the pandemic with UPS. It was just a perfect example of, okay, here's a test. FedEx and UPS, they are both strained by the pandemic because of the increase in volume that they have to, that they're being asked to transport. FedEx repeatedly failed. Their late deliveries were far more than UPS, and they made significantly less profit because less people wanted to go to FedEx because they knew that UPS was going to get it to them on time more often, and UPS was better able to retain employees and better able to take advantage of that environment where there is more volume. And so they made significantly more profits than FedEx did over the pandemic because of their workforce that was relatively well taken care of. Of course, there were a lot of issues, and a lot of those issues were addressed with this new tentative agreement. I think there's still more that some employees at UPS want, but it's a big step forward. And so that's a great point that you brought up about how, it's not as if the interests of us as federal employees. I'm not sure if you knew, or if Michael told you that I'm a member of AFGE Local 1858. Our interests are not in competition with the American public that we serve. It's actually, we're aligned. So that's a great point. And so with that, what were some of the things that y'all were able to win in this contract?
So let me just say, you're absolutely quite right about happy employees. They're more productive, morale's higher. You're looking at better retention of employees, and it's really that I'm going to use that as the jumping off point for what we wanted to do, what we wanted to accomplish through the negotiations. SSA during the pandemic, in a lot of ways, I already used the metaphor of building the plane in midair, and that really was something that we were doing at SSA for the 2 years that we were out due to COVID-19. We had gone from a scenario in which the last Republican commissioner had wiped out telework for our field offices, our 800 number, and our payment centers, among other places, and had curtailed telework for a lot of other support staff, such as in the hearing offices, headquarters, regional offices, et cetera. And we immediately, it was whiplash. We went from having these cuts and eliminations to all of a sudden going into a mandatory evacuation posture where everybody who could work remotely was working remotely, which was, upwards of 95% of the bargaining unit. Field office employees who traditionally, obviously working in the office most days, if not every day, were now working from home 100% of the time and trying to find, as with everybody else in the agency. And so it was this major culture shift where the agency had to acknowledge, for example, that we could do our work differently, and we needed to modernize our approach to public service. The people I represent, and I trust you're of like mind since you mentioned you're a fellow federal employee. We're mission minded. When I joined SSA in 2002, I did it because I wanted to serve my country. I wanted to give back to my community. That's how I was inclined. It wasn't just a job. I knew I wanted to serve the public.
So, Rich, you mean to tell me you didn't you didn't work for the federal government because you wanted to get rich?
Yeah, you caught me. I think it was it's something that JFK said about you should be federal employees should be comfortable knowing that they're not going to get rich serving the public, but they should be able to have a good life, and really that's what we need to strive for. And certainly not just federal employees, but workers in general. And there's, so this whole pandemic mind shift, the shift in the way that we did our work, it really helped save the agency because we were having hiring problems. We were having problems with adequate staffing, which led to service degradation. And the telework posture, this full telework posture, really helped keep people employed and serving the public, even under very exigent circumstances. And it really helped the agency hold on. When we started returning to the offices in late March 2022, we started seeing a precipitous drop in the bargaining unit size. We saw a lot of retirements, a lot of separations, and we knew of a lot of folks who were leaving either for other federal agencies where the working conditions were better, where the benefits were better. The micromanagement wasn't as existent as it is and prevalent as it is at SSA, particularly in the field offices and the hearing offices and elsewhere. And, we used to be a receiver agency. Like, we would attract employees from the VA, from the IRS, from the Department of Labor, and now we're a donor agency, and we give to those agencies, among others. And so we started seeing a public service emergency, a real crisis that was being driven by attrition and record levels of attrition. Our 800 numbers saw attrition levels around 20% in a year's time. Wow. And so what the agency, what SSA has tried to do, and you're seeing this with these regressive pieces of legislation out there, like the Show Up Act that the GOP's pushed in the House and is trying to get passed in the Senate, which would require federal employees to basically go back to pre-pandemic levels of telework. Some of the posturing of the Biden administration to try to force employees to go back to the offices in greater numbers. It really, it's things like this that are not congruent with reality. At SSA, we're seeing waiting times on the 800 number rise, and it's not because of telework. It's because we don't have enough people to answer the phone.
Right.
Waiting times right now are north of 35 minutes and growing. I mean, every time we lose an 800 number worker, that just adds to the wait times because it's one less person to share the workload, which means the public waits longer. And similarly, with staffing declines in the field offices and our workload support units, it just means that people are waiting longer for their claims to be processed, to get the money that they've earned, that they deserve by paying into the system. Likewise with the hearing offices, more support staff leave. It takes longer to get a case ready for hearing, get scheduled for hearing, and to have a decision issued. Thus we're making people wait longer to get the money that they're entitled to. And that's not right. And so, as you stated, our interests and the interests of the public are very much aligned. And so what we wanted to do through the limited reopener that we took care of, and the agreement that we reached, the tentative agreement that we reached, was to try to tackle as many of those issues as possible. What's driving attrition? What's making it more difficult for the agency to attract, recruit, and hold on to new workers? In fiscal year 22, we lost almost 17% of our new hires. I mean, these are people who were hired up off the street to go through rigorous training on our very complex programs, and they're not staying. And, that's a problem. And because they look around and they're like, wait a minute, I'm only getting paid this much, and I'm not guaranteed the same type of benefits that I can find in other agencies or other sectors. This isn't what I signed up for, and they leave. And we still see anecdotally, although I'll tell you, as recent as this week, as recent as Tuesday, we were in a meeting with the agency, and we asked for updated attrition figures. And they told us that because those figures aren't yet public, they're not going to share them. So they have them. They're just not going to give them to us. And so, the point that we've been making all along has been, how can we solve problems if we can't even identify and admit to what those problems are? Hiding attrition data isn't going to help serve the public any better. Right. And, maybe it makes the agency look bad, but, sunshine is the best disinfectant. And, having that information out there so we can talk about what those drivers are is critically important to obviously improving working conditions for the employees so that we're dealing with the causes of attrition and the causes of poor recruitment numbers. But we're also ensuring that we are maintaining, to the extent possible, the level of service that the public deserves. So, a lot of our proposals, some of those that you have mentioned, that you had mentioned at the outset of our conversation, such as the temporary compassionate assignments, the improvements in the lactation program, the prospective benefit that we're going to be looking at for emergency dependent care. These improvements in our disciplinary process, improvements in our employee rights article, a lot of these issues, we're going to have for the first time agency-wide a virtual detail program. So we're going to leverage technology to help with career opportunities for employees who oftentimes get stovepiped and are limited by the part of the agency in which they work, and oftentimes the geographical area in which they work. And so this is going to open up a whole world of opportunity for employees to advance themselves in their careers at SSA, give them more opportunities and greater flexibility and work-life balance. And all of that is a net positive. Certainly there's a lot of other issues, a lot of other things that we want to see have happen. But we are unfortunately constrained by the appropriations process and the arbitrary rules that really stymie the ability of Congress to give SSA the funding it needs to be a premier agency, to be the gold standard for public service in the government. So that was one of the main missions that we had, in recognizing that funding is a problem, and that the agency was very resistant to proposals that would cost money, and recognizing that we've had this problem where the traditional collective bargaining process has not worked in the way that it was designed under federal sector labor law, and certainly the way that we've experienced over the last 20, 30 years, where we can get agreements done fairly quickly. We've been able to do that historically, and now agreements that would take 2-3 days to negotiate, midterm agreements, impact and implementation stuff, that's now taking two to 3 weeks or 2 to 3 months, and oftentimes is only after we've filed grievances or ULP charges for failure to bargain and all the rest to compel the agency to go to the table in the first place. And so what we sought to do, and this is one of the things that President Biden has stated, but has not yet required through any type of executive order. The president has been very keen to see labor leadership and agency leadership across the government to come together and cooperate through a process similar to partnership, which was the term that was used during the Clinton administration that was very, very successful at SSA, and forums under the Obama administration, which was not as robust as, say, the Clinton era partnership, but it still resulted in a lot of good for both the employees and the public. And what this cooperation process that we were successful in negotiating at the table without having the benefit of an executive order to compel SSA to do so, was building a process by which union leaders such as myself and agency executives in the major components, in the Office of Commissioner, if need be, the Office of Human Resources, et cetera, we will meet directly, and we will run these meetings jointly, and we will establish these agenda items jointly. And there will be greater openness and transparency with respect to information and with respect to interests, to try to solve working condition issues and public service issues on a pre-decisional basis. And so by doing so, neither party is waiving any of their statutory contractual rights, but you remove all of the obstacles that are inherent with the traditional collective bargaining process, such as management rights, and they don't ever want to do anything that violates those. And everything to them is a violation. Everything to them is a violation of management rights. So those sorts of obstacles aren't present because technically management hasn't yet made a decision. And so by working together to come up with these cooperation agreements, we're calling them cooperation councils. By coming up with cooperation agreements on a pre-decisional basis, we can either obviate the need for formal bargaining post-decisionally, or we're at least limiting the number of issues left to negotiate in the traditional collective bargaining process. But by having the leadership interface directly and running the meetings jointly, rather than having the union go through a labor relations intermediary, which has not, and I'm being very generous in how I'm about to put this, has not been an effective or efficient way of getting the public's business done, shall we say. I hope is going to lead to greater benefit for the employees, greater benefit to the public in terms of improved public service. So we've already teed up several issues, such as a child care subsidy for lower income workers. That's something that we're going to tackle. We're going to tackle the future of training at SSA, because the training programs at SSA are abysmal and have been a major driver of our new hires leaving the agency, to provide better support to employees when they come out of training, they get proper mentoring and proper support when they're in the office, because our surveys and the emails that we've seen from employees who have left the agency within a year have all stated very consistently, I feel like I've been set up to fail. I'm not getting the support that I need. I don't know what I'm doing, frankly, because I haven't been provided the training and support that I need to understand these programs, which, I mean, a claims representative training class or specialist training class, that you're talking 3 to 4 months on just one of the two main programs that they're responsible for administering, whether it's retirement survivors and disability insurance or supplemental security income. These are very complex and technical programs that take months to train just on, the basic training. It takes 2, 3, 4, oftentimes 5 years to become proficient in these programs because of how technical they are. So, we're looking to sort of overhaul all of those things. And by doing so, again, to the extent possible in this cooperation process, where we can talk about interests and we can talk about what we need without having to worry about supposed violations of management rights and other types of pitfalls that would lead to disagreement and fighting. So we're hopeful that by having this new process in place, it will continue to yield further results that will benefit employees and the public alike.
Great. Well, brother, I really appreciate your time. That's great news, great background. I hope it's been educational for the audience. So looking forward to having you on again, and really excited about this for the 42,000 workers of the Social Security Administration across the country.
Thank you for having me, and please invite me back on anytime.
All right. Rich Kuchar, president of AFGE Council 215, not 220. I got mixed up on that because there are a lot of councils representing Social Security workers. So appreciate that correction at the top of the interview. We're going to be right back. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to be right back, and we're going to go through what happened last week in Southern labor, and if we have time, we're going to get to Shawn Fain's reaction to Stellantis' proposals to the UAW. We'll be right back, folks. Stay tuned.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and neighbors are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough to keep their jobs. We need to fix this. Let's close the health care coverage gap. To learn more, visit coveralabama.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Iron Workers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs, from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. Report. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Iron Workers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
The Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact Donna at their training center to start the process. That phone number is 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is their mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Do you work in an auto manufacturing plant? Are you tired of taking pride in your work without getting the respect you deserve? Consider joining the fight to unionize. Auto workers across the industry are coming together because with a union, we can negotiate for the pay, benefits, and security that we deserve and can help sustain our families. In union plants, workers bargain for long-term wage increases, competitive bonuses, and more affordable benefits. You can join the growing wave of organizing today. Find out more and contact us at Uniting Auto Workers on Facebook or contact UAW Region 8 in Lebanon, Tennessee by going to www.uawregion8.net. That's www.uawregion8.net. A better future is ours.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union talk radio show. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We just wrapped up a conversation with Brother Rich Kuchar of the Social Security Administration, one of the leaders of the American Federation of Government Employees, the largest union of federal workers. Really cool stuff about the contract that they have just won within the Social Security Administration. And listeners agree, AFGE cool is a chat that we have gotten. And I agree. Absolutely. And that's a great message that I just got in the chat. DeSantis said he was going to slit some throats of federal workers on day one of his administration if he wins. Yeah. He said, quote, the deep state, it's everybody. Everybody working for the government.
Yeah, so the person you call when you're trying to get your Social Security is apparently the deep state.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. exactly. He wants...
Okay, there's a lot I would say. I'm just not going to say much that I'm thinking right now.
We are on the radio.
We're on the radio.
All right, so instead of getting in trouble, let's talk about last week in Southern labor, because every week, folks, workers in the South are on the move. You're not going to hear it in the news, but you're going to hear about it here. So let's get right into it with the new election filings. 8 engineers and mechanics at Jones Lang LaSalle in Jacksonville, Florida, filed for a union election with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW Local 177. 20 workers at a Starbucks cafe in Lexington, South Carolina, filed for an election with Starbucks Workers United. 24 workers at MV Transportation in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, filed for an election with the Amalgamated Transit Union, ATU Local 1546. 1 quality assurance worker at Ardent Mills in Sherman, Texas, filed a petition to be added to the currently unionized bargaining unit with the Bakery, Confectionery, Tobacco, and Grain Millers Union, BCTGM Local 111. 4 production and maintenance workers at CTI Foundation Terminal Incorporated in Savannah, Georgia, filed for an election with the United Steelworkers Local 673. 16 workers at Hospital Damas in Pounce, Puerto Rico, filed for an election with the Unidad Laboral de Enfermeros y Empleados de la Salud.
Good job. That's better than I would have done.
ULEES. 13 delivery drivers for Restaurant Technologies Incorporated in Dallas, Texas, filed for an election with the Brotherhood of Teamsters, Local 745. 21 workers at Blue Crew in New Orleans, Louisiana, doing mechanic work and more, filed for an election with Workers United. 22 workers at a Starbucks cafe in Greenville, South Carolina, filed for a union election with Starbucks Workers United. 16 workers at Primary Medical Group in Ponce, Puerto Rico, filed for a union election with the same union, ULEES. Staff, and here there were several petitions that were withdrawn in the last week, and this one in particular is sus. Somebody got to figure out what's going on in the Democratic Party in Tennessee, because last week, staff for the Tennessee Democratic Party withdrew their petition for union election with the IBEW.
Interesting.
Yeah. What the hell's going on in Tennessee? Some of y'all, I know that I've got some listeners that have connections with the Tennessee Democratic Party. Y'all got to figure out what's going on up there. Make sure there's not management shenanigans. Workers at Georgia Windstream in Dalton, Georgia, withdrew their petition for a union election. Workers at Amtech Controls Southeast in Pineville, North Carolina, withdrew their petition for a union election, as well as workers at Nestle in Hartwell, Georgia, and workers at Pruitt Health in Panama City, Florida. Ugh. Bad stuff, but we got a lot of union wins. People who have filed for union election, voted, and won last week, too, including 60 workers at South Kentucky Rural Electric Cooperative in Somerset, Kentucky, who voted to unionize 40-16 with the IBEW Local 2100.
Nice.
5 workers, however, at Savannah Morning News in Savannah, Georgia, voted against unionization 0-3 with the News Guild CWA. 70 workers at Bradley Technologies Incorporated in Washington, D.C. voted in favor of unionization 13-1 with a union called Union Rights for Security Officers. Never heard of them. 31 workers at Amentum Services Incorporated in Fort Johnson, formerly Fort Polk, Louisiana, voted in favor of unionization 20-1.
Nice.
With the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers. And finally, 74 workers across Alabama at AT&T won voluntary recognition from the company after they presented union authorization cards signed by a majority of the employees to be represented by the Communication Workers of America, CWA. Excited to see that. There was a big settlement last week by the American Federation of Government Employees, who won a settlement with the Department of Veterans Affairs, securing return rights and back pay for, get this, nearly 5,000 employees who were wrongfully disciplined and terminated after the department illegally implemented new rules without bargaining over them. That's the power of a union, folks. 5,000 workers getting a check because their boss overstepped. Not going to get that anywhere else. There are A couple of updates in strikes and bargaining. 1,400 workers at Frontier Communication in West Virginia and Ashburn, Virginia, voted to give their bargaining team the authority to call a strike if necessary. The contract expired on the 5th of August, but has been extended through the 19th of August. So a week from today, when we're broadcasting, is the contract extension. They allowed it to extend through the 19th of August to allow bargaining to continue. Key issues in the negotiations are health care. The company's offer had none, better job security, and curbing the company use of subcontracting. There are no new strikes in the South this week, but baristas at Three Brothers Coffee in Nashville are still on strike, as are bakery plant workers at IFF, who are unionized with BCTGM in Memphis, Tennessee. The UAW continues to put pressure on the big three automakers, with International President Shawn Fain making a show of throwing Stellantis' proposal in the literal trash and doing a live stream with U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders talking about the demands of the union and the working conditions of its members. The chief negotiator from Stellantis and its COO, Mark Stewart, has been away in his second home in Mexico for the last 2 weeks instead of attending bargaining, while sending letters to the UAW to, quote, focus on reality during their negotiations. Love to see that. The UPS Teamsters are continuing to vote on the tentative agreement. Voting closes and the votes will be tallied on August the 22nd. In politics and legislation, industry groups in Orange County, Florida, sued and blocked a modest cap on rent hikes that was approved by voters in Orange County, Florida, by 59%. They did that in 2022, and today rent is up over 30% since 2020 in Orange County. Major labor organizations like the Service Employees International Union, SEIU, the American Federation of Teachers, AFT, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFSCME, and the American Federation of Labor and Congress of Industrial Organizations, AFL-CIO, have kicked off a $50 million campaign to put child and senior care legislation back on the priority list, specifically universal paid parental leave, child care, and paid medical leave for all U.S. workers. The U.S. Department of Labor last week announced the issuance of the final rule updating the Davis-Bacon and Related Acts regulation to update the regulations that implement the Davis-Bacon Act to reflect better the needs of construction workers on federal construction investments. We're going to dive deeper into that here in the coming weeks, but the upshot of that is construction workers on federal projects going to make more money. Gonna be safer, gonna have more job security. Really good stuff. And finally, in internal union affairs, the International Alliance of Theatrical and Stage Employees, IATSE, allocated an additional $2 million in support of members affected by film and TV work stoppages, bringing their total contributions to this fund to $4 million since the strikes began. If we missed something going on in the South, let us know, folks. TVLR.fm/contact. If you've got a tip about a labor story that you think should be included in a roundup like this, send us a tip, and we will be sure to put it in. All right, we're not going to have time to take a look at Shawn Fain's reaction to Stellantis' proposal during the main show, but we're going to quickly react instead to something that our governor said. Our governor, Kay Ivey, she was giving an address to the Athens Limestone County Chamber of Commerce. For those of you who don't know, the Chamber of Commerce is not a government organization. It is the Federation of Bosses in regional areas. So this is the organization of bosses in Athens and Limestone County that she was speaking to. And she was talking about Alabama's labor force participation rate, and she said that she wants to get it up because, so now she's saying basically, we've done everything there is to do on the unemployment rate. Now we got to start focusing on the labor force participation rate. And so when she said that initially, I was not opposed to it. I think that there are things that can be done. We can have free education for people, free workforce retraining. We can create more government jobs with the state. by doing important public works projects like updating our schools and libraries and county and municipal buildings. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in Alabama. People in Lowndes County, Alabama, a lot of them still don't have sewage, is my understanding. There's a lot of work that we could be doing as the state. There's a lot of training we could be doing as the state. And so, look, if we want to attack the labor force participation rate, there's a lot of stuff that we can do. But that's not what she wants to do. Instead, Kay Ivey wants to scold us. That's what she wants to do. She said, quote, "We've got to get to work on getting 50,000 folks who aren't looking for jobs, get them off their fannies, get them looking for jobs because there are jobs to be had." This is how they view us, right? We don't work hard enough. We are lazy. That's how the governor of our state views her citizens. She says people are not in the workforce, therefore they are lazy. And so the way to get them into the workforce is to scold them. Instead of thinking about, for 2 seconds, why is it, maybe, that somebody isn't in the workforce? Are they caring for their children? Because remember, actually, if you take a look at the working age labor force participation rate in the country, it is as high, basically, as it has ever been. If you take a look at the number of people that are aged 25 to 54, see how much of them are in the workforce, it is 83.2%. It was only higher in the late 90s, and it only ever got to 84%. Okay? So we are basically having as many working age people working as we ever have. Right? So if somebody's before 25, maybe it's fine that they're not working. Maybe they're in college. If somebody's over 54, maybe it's fine that they're not working because they're retired. Maybe if somebody's even in between there and not working, maybe they're taking care of their children, which is something that people like her, people on her side of the aisle, say that women aren't doing enough of. Saying that, women, they need to stay home and take care of their kids, and then they're going to turn around and scold those same women because they are staying home and taking care of the kids. You got to pick a lane, folks, because if every woman stayed home, guess what? The labor force participation rate in Alabama wouldn't be 60 or 70%. It would be 50%. It would be 40-something percent, right? So you got to pick a lane. Do you want people to work or do you not? And then if you want people to work, you got to figure out how to support them instead of scolding them, because that's not going to get people back on the job. If you want people to work, you got to figure out how to support them. Maybe there are people that are not able to work because if they work just a little bit, then they lose their Medicaid, which means that they don't have any health insurance and they could die. Think about how perverse the system we have is, that working could be a death sentence. And that's even just thinking about if they're going to lose Medicaid, right? And that's not even taking into account that Alabama's workplaces are more dangerous than the workplaces of 46 other states. Remember, we have the 4th highest workplace fatality rate. 5.5 per 100,000 workers on the job are going to die in Alabama this year, right? So there are a lot of things that we could be doing to bring our labor force participation rate up, but they don't want to do that. They just want to scold us. And so, I'm not super interested in that, actually, as a working person. So that's what I've got to say on that. Do you have anything before we wrap up, Adam?
Oh, yeah, I've got a lot, but it is 10:58, and so I'm going to save it for overtime.
All right, yeah, let's do that. We're going to take a couple of plugs, and then we're going to wrap that up after we get off the air, and then we're going to go into overtime. So just a reminder, folks, labornotes.org, they always have great events. Check them out. They're a sponsor of Shop Talk. Really cool stuff. Alabama Arise has a town hall coming up. Or they have town halls coming up, so make sure that you go to alarise.org, where Adam is now the Northeast Alabama organizer. I don't know if we've announced that on the air, but it is public, so that's really cool. Adam was on America's Workforce last Thursday, so check that out. Don't forget Shop Talk every Thursday morning. If you're not on our email list, tvlr.fm, get on it. And send us money, tvlr.fm/donate, folks. So that is going to wrap it up for today. We are going to continue for another hour and a half at least. We may go long today. I don't know, because we got a lot of stuff to get to. But find us online where we're going to continue going. And with that, folks, we'll see you next week. Okay, we're off the radio. Yeah, so Adam, what are your thoughts about that?
About Kay Ivey saying we need to get off our fannies.
Yeah. How did you react positively to the scolding of our governor? Do you think that makes a lot of sense?
Yeah, there was a lot that went through my head. There's a lot of things that I will not say publicly that I said when I heard her say this, because I find it really demeaning. I find it really insulting to people. 1 in 3 adults in Alabama has a disability. 1 in 3.
Right.
As you mentioned, with Medicaid, we have some of the strictest Medicaid requirements in the country. And over 300,000 people in Alabama would gain health care if we expanded Medicaid. Over 300,000. There are over 200,000 Alabamians currently caught in a coverage gap. They make too much for Medicaid, but not enough for health insurance. Right? That's over 200,000 people. Let's see, what else went through my head? Oh, yeah. The fact that Alabama doesn't invest not $1 in public transportation. Not $1, not a single bit of state revenue is dedicated to public transportation in the entire state. It took years just to fight and achieve a public transportation trust fund. 5 years later, there's no revenue.
Right.
5 years later, no public transportation, right? Folks have to be able to get to work if you want them to participate. If you want them to work, they have to be able to arrive at work, get home from work. Okay, what else we got going on? As I mentioned, the healthcare aspect to it is so huge because there are folks out there who maybe could work if they had appropriate health care. There are people out there who are struggling with substance use disorders, mental illnesses, physical illnesses, recurring illnesses, that if they had proper health care, they could work. But we don't do that in this state, right? We don't give a shit about health care in this state, according to folks in state government. And it's very frustrating and it's very demeaning to say that to people who are struggling and are fighting so hard just to survive. They want us to think that there's just like this mass of folks who are lazy, good for nothing, mooching off tax dollars. And that's just really, really insulting to the working class folks here in the state. I don't think Kay Ivey would want to swap places with them. And there are a lot of folks out there who, if we had proper infrastructure, if we had proper health care, if we had proper transportation, they could participate in the workforce. They could be, fully productive members of society as they're expected to be. But as you also illustrated, a lot of these folks have responsibilities and are doing things right now, taking care of sick parents, taking care of sick kids, taking care of multiple kids, taking care of not just their own disabilities, but other folks with disabilities. That's all happening. And these people are also, in many cases, working in the cash economy. How many of these 50,000 folks she's talking about are working?
Right.
But they're working under the table. They're working for cash. They're doing, illegal jobs, however you want to talk about that, for various reasons. Because let's not forget, criminal justice is a factor here in the state of Alabama, because the state of Alabama has one of the highest incarceration rates in the United States. That means inside our borders, we lock up more people than almost any other place on planet Earth. Those people have records.
Yeah.
How many folks would work if they were given a chance? But because of prior arrest, they They got locked up for pot. They got locked up for petty crime. Something happened in their youth. Now 10, 15, 20 years down the road, they're struggling to find gainful employment. There's so much you could get into there. And just to say, get off your fannies, I think is really, really revealing of a limited mindset. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
And no, I don't appreciate it as a working class person.
Well, so there you go, folks. There you go. We're going to take a break really quick, get a drink of water, and then we're going to be right back with Overtime. We got some good stuff for you, folks. We got some students from Arizona that have been organizing, and we have 2 union members from Alabama who were in the Alabama delegation to the DSA convention. I think it was like 40% of the whole delegation to the DSA convention were union members. So that's pretty cool. We're going to talk to them. So yeah, folks, we're going to be right back. Stay tuned.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
You're still listening to the Valley Labor Report, Alabama's only union talk radio show. We are now in overtime, where we are online only. None of this plays on any radio station, so we are free from the shackles of the FCC censors. Even though we don't really take advantage of that a whole lot, we're pretty clean on this show. But
I did say a cuss word earlier. I'm sorry.
But we could if we wanted to, because we're now only online. So
yeah, it was Kay Ivey, man. She does make me cuss sometimes.
Crazy.
Sorry.
Yeah, that was crazy. That was a crazy comment. You just gotta wonder how much time she puts in working, like even just meetings. Like I wonder if you added all of her meetings or any other paperwork or anything that she does, any talking speeches, I wonder if it would add up to 40 hours in a week. The guess would be no, but I don't know. Who knows? And then even then, you know, I'm being pretty charitable by counting meetings as work. But anyway, we've got some great stuff lined up for you folks. Jim Cramer is continuing to wet himself about Shawn Fain. And Patrick Bet-David, we learned some more stuff about him last week from our friends over at Left Reckoning, so we're going to talk about that. But first up, we're going to talk about some college students in Arizona organizing with the Arizona Education Association, and because they want some better stuff. So
I think it's a little cooler than that, actually.
Oh, it's cooler than that.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. I gotta say, as a former educator, I am really appreciative of these folks who are doing this organizing, because I remember what it was like to be a student teacher. And as a student teacher, you're doing an internship that is unpaid. And nobody takes care of those bills for you, right, while you're a student teacher. You still are responsible for all that. So
your bank
anyway,
won't let you not pay the mortgage?
right, yeah. You can't just call up the bank and be like, hey, actually, I'm doing my internship right now. Like, I really got to, plan these lessons and grade these tests. Like, sorry. It doesn't work that way. And so, I thought it was really cool to hear about this organizing happening in Arizona. So let's bring on Johnny, and I think Johnny actually has some other folks with him. So welcome to the Valley Labor Report, y'all.
Thank y'all. Before we introduce ourselves specifically, Jess, did you want to kind of break down our overarching union, that what we represent, and what is the
Absolutely. Hello, I'm Jessica Bailey, and I am an aspiring educator from Virginia. We are part of the National Education Association, the NEA, which is the largest labor union in the country, which is 3,000 million members. And we are aspiring educators, college students, university students, preparing to enter the field of education. So we are a part of that NEA family, and we are getting ready to go into classrooms as educators someday, and just excited to be here and discuss with y'all about what we're planning and hoping to bring forth in the coming months and years.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm curious if y'all will all just kind of introduce yourself and tell us what got you involved in activism.
Yeah, so I think I can start off. My name is Johnny Otero. I'm from Arizona, use he, him pronouns, and really started getting into labor organizing when I started hearing from my ancestors about how they organized. My grandpa and my family were very involved with the United Farm Workers movement, and so always hearing those stories, as a Chicano, about the labor movement has always been in my upbringing. And so as an educator, joining my union was the first thing that I ever did as an aspiring educator. And so I saw the injustices happening around paid student teaching. At my university, I didn't see enough people that looked like me, that talked like me. And so I saw this issue as very much something to work around for working class, BIPOC specifically.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Johnny. Who else we got on the call this morning? Because I know we've got someone who just joined. Jalen, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah. Sorry. Hi, my name is Jalen Bridgeforth. I am no longer an aspiring educator. I just graduated May 20th from Morgan State University. Thank you. With a degree in elementary education and a minor in political science. I've always been very into like activism and movements and cultural social awareness and civil disobedience. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, which is like the home of civil disobedience. So it's always been a part of my life, what I do. And, it's just the culture I grew up around. Is if you see an injustice, you stand up, you stop it, you do what you need to do. And so when I got to my senior year, to my internship, when they told us that we weren't going to be paid for the work we were doing, it just kind of brought me back to like all those lessons I learned as a child of like, if you see something is wrong, you stop it. And it was wrong that we weren't being paid for our labor. So that's kind of what got me into this particular movement.
Yeah, that's awesome, and glad to see Southerner on the call as well. That's really cool. And Jessica, you introduced yourself a little bit, but I'm curious also what got you, involved in this organizing.
I come from Virginia, and as an aspiring educator who's Asian American, there isn't much representation in my state, and I just saw a big hole in space for representation that needed to be brought up there, and bringing forth that activism spirit in my heart that I want to do more. I want to be there and have a seat at the table just brought me to be part of this team, and seeing the need for being paid. Paid student teaching is really, really a big deal and needs to be paid attention to in Virginia. And I just saw that as something that I needed to step up and be part of this action and be part of this space, especially as an aspiring educator that is Asian, and there isn't many aspiring educators that come from my community, and just being part of the change.
I think that is so cool. I just want to congratulate all three of you before we talk more about this campaign, because it can be tough to get involved. It can be tough to try to make a difference. But everyone who feels it in their heart to become an educator does so because they want to make a difference in their community. They want to have a positive impact on young people, which really, when you positively impact young people, you're impacting an entire generation. You're really shaping the world in which we live in. And so I find that educators are uniquely positioned to get into the work of organizing and activism because of that drive that we all have to try to make that difference. But often folks don't take that plunge because it is scary, and I really, really applaud y'all, particularly as young people. And one of the things that we try to do on this show is make sure that we're having dialogue between different types of folks that are in the labor movement. And that's, in all of its categories, from race to age to gender to industry and, geography, because the working class is so diverse. There's so many pieces of labor and the folks who do the labor in our world. So anyway, I wanted to just say all that before we get into the campaign. So talk to us about paid student teaching. Why is this an important issue? And what have y'all been doing to organize around this issue?
I can talk a little bit about that. So paid student teaching is a huge issue nationwide. It's an egregious misservice to aspiring educators across the nation. So every state is a little bit different, but I'll tell you about Maryland, how we do it. So in the state of Maryland, to be certified as an educator, you have to spend 180 days inside of a classroom. So that's an entire school year, 180 days. We start doing that process pretty early on. So like our sophomore, junior year, we'll maybe spend like 5 days here, 5 days there, just, starting to whittle down that number. Then in your senior year, you should only have 120 days left. And you spend those 120 days in a classroom full time. You are a teacher. You have a co-teacher, someone that's been teaching in Maryland, the minimum is 5 years to become a co-teacher. And so you have someone there, but oftentimes your co-teacher isn't being paid for letting you be in their classroom. So they're not very interested in having you there. I've had some of my friends, like when their co-teacher found out they were getting an intern, they just were like, okay, I'm not going to do my job. You're the teacher. So 120 days you're in a classroom, 5 days a week. You're going to parent-teacher conferences. You're going to back to school night. You're an educator at this point, but you're not being paid for any of that time. And then because you are a teacher, you can't really pick up another job. So you still have classwork on top of this. Also, you still have to take your certificate exams, everything. And they tell you beforehand, like your professors, almost every aspiring ed I've talked to has had the same conversation with their professor where their professor says, don't take another job your senior year. You're going to be so stressed out. You're going to be so burnt out. But if I'm not being paid for the job that I'm doing, and I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth, I have no way to live. I can't survive. It was getting to the point where I was going to my friend's house so I could have dinner every night. Because I can't buy myself a meal. What money? I don't have a job. And I still have to afford a place to live. I don't drive, so I was taking Ubers every day with no money to back it up. But if I leave and I don't do this internship, I don't get to be an educator.
Right.
Was the problem that me and other aspiring educators were incurring across the nation.
Yeah, I really resonate with that because during my time as an intern, what I was doing was working at a sports bar. And so I was working some late nights, but then still having to turn around and get up early in the morning and do my teacher role. And it was just very, very difficult. And I mean, it is a struggle because like you said, academically, it's really best that you just focus on the internship and all the extra that you're still doing alongside it, your portfolio or testing or whatever it may be. That makes the most academic sense, but practically for most of us coming from working class backgrounds, how are we going to survive, right? I mean, there's student loans. And so you've got that option. Maybe it's enough. And of course, that gets you into a whole nother scenario in terms of a debt sentence that's going to follow you around throughout your adulthood. And so there's a lot there. And I'm really glad to hear that personal testimony because so many of us who've gone through that have those stories and the difficulty of just surviving that semester or that year or however long it is in your particular state. So, having heard that, Johnny, I'm really curious about the organizing y'all have done around this and, how have y'all been kind of getting this story out there and getting people engaged to take action around this issue?
Right. And so just recently we started meeting nationally where we have roughly around 20 plus or states or so, meeting, trying to get organized, trying to start the conversation. But at the moment here in Arizona, we're talking to our legislators. One of the representatives, Senator Mendez, he agreed to sponsor a bill where, called the Teacher Shortage Act, where we're gonna to stop this teacher shortage. Right, we all know it's a retention issue, but we've seen great success in other states like Michigan, Maryland from Jay Lynn. I don't know if Jay, if you wanted to hop back on this space and talk about your success in Maryland. I know their state is something that we all look at nationally to target and see how do we organize this, who do we talk to, and so Maryland was a great state in starting those conversations.
Yeah, I'd love to hear some more about what's been going on in Maryland, if that's possible.
Always. So, I really do not like not having my way. Um, I want everything done my way. There is no highway option. So when I found out that I was not getting paid, I like became the worst kind of person. I complained to everyone that would like listen to me, even if you didn't want to listen to me. I was complaining. And then eventually I just complained to the right people. And one of my state organizers with the Maryland State Education Association, which is an affiliate of the National Education Association, she asked me, she was like, well, do you want to do something about it? And I was like, yeah, I want to do something about it. I'm not getting paid. And so that kind of started a statewide campaign for what we called the Maryland Teacher Shortage Act, which was basically a plan put in place to remedy the teacher shortage that we're experiencing in Maryland. And part of that act is to encourage more people to go into education. So it was a really long, hard fight. But we talked to our legislators, we talked to anyone that would listen. We started petitions. We were going to the state capitol twice a week. We really were just talking to anyone that would have our ear about why this was a problem, why this was an issue. And we were eventually able to win. It just went into effect July 1st, paid student teaching in the state of Maryland for college campuses. Thank you. It's so great. It's so great to like have this and to just know like, I'm sorry, other aspiring educators in Maryland don't have to go through what I went through. Because my senior year was horrible. I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit. My senior year was horrible. Like I was struggling every day. I couldn't figure out like what I was going to do. And so I'm happy to know like other students in Maryland don't have to look at that. So with the Maryland Shortage Act provisions, if you go to a college with an accredited education program in Maryland that receives 40% Pell Grant in the student population, so 40% of the student population receives a Pell Grant, you as an aspiring educator will receive a $20,000 stipend to cover expenses your senior year. As well as that $20,000 stipend, we also expanded the Maryland Teaching Fellows Scholarship. So basically, the state manufactured this new scholarship that will cover room, board, all other expenses, housing, transportation, as well as tuition at every single college campus in the state of Maryland. If you if you are an aspiring educator and you pledge to work at a Title I school for however many years you win the scholarship. So if I applied for the scholarship for 3 years, I teach in a Title I school for 3 years.
Right.
So as well as the stipend and expanding that scholarship, we're working hard to get the aspiring educators in Maryland taken care of.
Yeah, that is fantastic to hear. And, you know, I know the work continues and there's more to work on there, but the teacher recruitment and retention challenge can be solved, right? It's solvable problems, and this is one of those solvable problems because it is a barrier to success. It's a barrier for folks to complete the program, to enter the program, right? And you know, something that Jessica mentioned earlier is about, you know, there are not a lot of educators that look like her, all right? And it is so important that we have educators who do reflect the student population, right? And as you mentioned, not everyone's born with a silver spoon, right? And that shouldn't be a requirement to enter in of all professions, the teaching profession. And so, but one of my favorite things about what you just told me though is you were asked the question, do you want to do something about it? Right? That classic organizer question of like, okay, so I've heard your complaints, I've heard these issues. All right, are you ready? Do you want to do something about it? And it's so cool to me that the three of you young people have all said yes, I do. And so I wanted to give Jessica and Johnny a chance to jump back in the conversation and just kind of share any final words that y'all have about this campaign or about your experience organizing around this campaign.
I was going to talk about, like, in Virginia, I come from a state that it's been all about collective bargaining. Our state just won back the rights to collective bargain. And so this paid student teaching conversation has been coming up for the past 3 years, several years, and I've been talking about it over and over and over, and no one's really listened to the conversation. And so I've learned recently that my state is actually trying to introduce some legislation that could hopefully help bring paid student teaching to Virginia. So it's just moving forward little bit by little bit and inching it forward to have those conversations with people and just bring up this issue because it is a barrier to this profession. It's a barrier to education and to us. I know some schools, not necessarily specifically in Virginia, but their colleges or universities require them, the aspiring educators or student teachers, to sign a contract or sign a waiver that says that they will not work during their student teaching placement. And that is a major barrier as well. How are you supposed to live if you can't work and have money to provide for your expenses during the time that you're student teaching? And that's a big piece that has been a barrier, at least for some aspiring educators that I've seen in Virginia as well. And I've just been very active in making my voice heard to spread the news, and being part of this campaign is helping to move those conversations forward in my state and get people to listen, get people to hear that this is an issue that needs to be paid attention to. So I'm very excited to be part of this team and be part of this organizing to start this campaign across the country, especially in Virginia.
That's awesome. Awesome. Johnny? And also, if y'all could let us know before we wrap here, how folks can get involved, how folks can get plugged in. Particularly I'm thinking about educators, but for anyone who wants to offer their solidarity.
And yeah, so I just wanted to bring up in this space about some current bandages that we have seen in student teaching. We have seen other states, other districts put a sort of like infected Band-Aid on this issue, right? Where we see shortcuts becoming teachers. We see student teachers now becoming teacher of record, meaning that they don't have mentor. And am I okay? Am I lagging at all?
A little bit.
Yeah, you're lagging a little bit. Sorry about that.
Is it better if I turn off my camera?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, probably.
All right, cool. But no, yeah, I was just saying that, these shortcuts effectively, becoming the teacher of record, it hurts students, it hurts schools, and it hurts the educators that work there. We're less prepared when we're then all of a sudden put into, the classroom as the teacher of record. So ensuring that, we do have different modes of student teaching. So like Jay said, in Maryland, we have, I believe it's a stipend. It's not quite a residency, but I know the NEA has lobbied for residency programs. Statistically, they've shown that if you are in a residency program, you are 95% more likely to be an educator in the next 5 years. And it's like when talking about like that teacher shortage, right? Like that is one way. If we invest in teaching and teachers early on, I mean, it'll pay out in the long run. So I simply like to call it, investing and solving the exploitation at the pre-exploitation, right? Because student teaching is pre-exploitation. But other than that, for folks, joining online that are wanting to, maybe you're an aspiring educator, a future teacher, you're in college, I would say any advice is to join your union, start the conversation around all work, no pay, and let's get paid student teaching solved. What else do y'all have to share, Jess and Jay involved?
I would just say
Uh-oh, did we lose y'all?
I'm still here. I didn't know if
Okay,
Jay was speaking.
sure. If you want to just
Go ahead,
give us the plug in terms of, is there social media set up yet, or is there any particular way to kind of connect with y'all? Because obviously y'all have an organizing team going on right now. So for anyone who is an aspiring educator, how could they get plugged in with y'all?
We have a group in our aspiring ed program. We have a group me formed, but my first advice would be to get connected with your local chapters at your university. So you could go to nea.org and search to find information there where your local chapter might be. But we also do have a group me going, and a Google form that we have been sharing with our aspiring educators to get involved. We don't have any social media up and running yet, but our plan for our group and team is to come up with a packet so that we could help push those materials and flyers and information out about paid student teaching, and a guide for us as aspiring educators to start advocating at our state level for this. But I could put information, I guess, for our group me in the
I think that's perfect. Folks should get linked up with their chapter at the local level, but y'all are working on getting this campaign really on the ground, off the ground, and get some more momentum going here. And I got to say, I think that's a great idea. Put together a grassroots toolkit kind of thing. And I have no doubt there are some good NSO brothers and sisters, working for your NEA affiliates who will be happy to help y'all with that. So, as a former NSO member for over 5 years, shout out to all of my former brothers and sisters who are working for NEA and the NEA affiliates. I have no doubt they'll help you with that. And so really excited to hear this from y'all. I love to see folks getting involved early on, because this is a real issue that's affecting real people for all the reasons y'all explained. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for fighting the good fight.
Thank y'all so much for having us. Y'all have a good day.
Appreciate it. Yep. Y'all too.
Yes, thank you so much for this opportunity. This is my first time doing a podcast, so hopefully I did a good job.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Seriously, we appreciate it.
Yeah.
Y'all take care.
All right, folks. Really appreciate that. And that's really, really great news. And looking for more wins on that front. Because,
it's a great campaign. I think it's going to be something that resonates with folks, whatever state you're in. So that's cool to hear what's been going on in Maryland. And, hope to see some more momentum. And I'd love to see folks in Alabama working on it, because like I said, it's something I experienced. It's something that every educator goes through, and most of us are it's a struggle. So yeah, it's a great campaign, great idea. Love to see young people get involved.
Let's talk about Yellow again. You'll remember that Yellow is a less than truckload freight company that we spoke to Teddy Ostro about before it went bankrupt, and since then it has actually gone bankrupt. And exactly as we predicted, not only the company but a lot of people in corporate media, including right here at home, longtime listeners of the show will recognize Scott Buttram, publisher, owner, boss, capitalist of the Trussville Tribune. He was celebratory of the 22,000 Teamsters losing their jobs because he hates union workers, because he hates it when workers have any sort of say over their workplace. He also, here's a fun fact, when it was announced that 74 AT&T workers were voluntarily recognized by AT&T to unionize with the CWA, he said something like, "Congratulations to AT&T customers whose phones will now be subject to the whims of a union," showing that he had no idea that most AT&T workers are unionized already. This is just a guy who routinely shows himself to be completely ignorant about issues facing working people and belligerent and, just kind of wicked in the way that he views working people and the outcomes that he works for working people that have just the tiniest bit of backbone and don't absolutely fillet people like him. But anyway, that's been going on in the corporate media outside of Alabama as well, saying that Yellow's bankruptcy is due to the Teamsters. And Sean O'Brien has been fighting back against that narrative. And here is him on Fox Business addressing some of these allegations. Let's listen to this clip.
I have to ask you, do you feel responsible for the 22,000 Teamster jobs that are being lost because Yellow filed for Chapter 11 on Sunday?
No, not at all. I mean, our members have given back $5 billion in concessions since 2009, and 3 other times since 2009. Yellow's always come back to the well looking for more and more out of our members, and it just got to a point where they were so mismanaged. It's always easy to blame someone else, and that's okay, but at the end of the day, the facts don't lie, and Yellow's got to look themselves in the mirror and accept what they've done.
Well, the company is now again, they've filed, it looks like it's going to be an asset sale, the trucks, the terminals, etc. But when Mark was here yesterday, Mark Kasowitz, he told me, and I'm paraphrasing, he said, at the last minute when they, meaning you and your team, understood that Yellow had to file, that union leadership called the company, this is over the weekend, numerous times, try to get the company to make a deal. But at that point, Mark says it was too late to save the company.
The company reached out to us. We were meeting, and the company wanted all kinds of changes that, look, the reality of it, they were so far in debt, no matter what happened, it would have never worked. And, it's like I said, it's easy to blame someone else. Think about this. Our members gave back $5 billion in pension and wages since 2009. The company received $700 million under the CARES Act for COVID under the Trump administration, and then Apollo Global gave them another $600 million a couple of years ago. So they couldn't even manage what they were given, and it's easy to blame everybody else. But you look back and see what our members sacrificed. The sad part about this whole thing is now through this liquidation, we definitely need bankruptcy reform in this country, because all those concessions and all the money and all the jobs lost and the obligations, our union members, our union funds, the last line of creditors. So everybody's going to reap, the benefits of the liquidation, whether it's, and I hope the CEO has a little moral compass and doesn't take any type of golden parachute, because, at the end of the day, he's got to accept the consequences for what he did.
And so that was Sean O'Brien educating Fox News about what has actually happened. And, you know, I am certainly not holding my breath of waiting for a CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company to have a moral compass, but hope springs eternal. And what she was saying is exactly what the host was saying is exactly what not only has the company been going with on TV, but they actually put these allegations in their official bankruptcy filing. It was penned by a former conservative Republican congressional candidate, according to the American Prospect, who wrote an article about this titled Yellow Scapegoats Teamsters for Apollo-Led Bankruptcy. And in that filing, the American Prospect says that the person who wrote it spins a tale about, quote, a plucky little company that was ritually executed by a power-mad union boss. And so they allege Sean O'Brien, and here's a quote from the filing, quote, knowingly and intentionally triggered a death spiral for Yellow to teach a lesson to his more powerful rivals. And, you know, despite no evidence for that and no reasoning for that. And so they say that he used Yellow, Sean O'Brien, as a sacrificial lamb to gain leverage against UPS. He also claimed that O'Brien deliberately prevented the company from adopting the second phase of One Yellow, which was a restructuring program that Yellow put out. And Yellow claims that instead of complying with them, Yellow and the Teamsters made, quote, extra contractual demands. Yellow, in the company's telling, tried to accommodate the union, but the union was just simply too obstinate and would not ever make any concessions necessary to keep the company alive. So they say that by stalling phase 2, O'Brien, quote, intended to weaken Yellow, scare off Yellow's customers, inhibit Yellow's ability to refinance its debt, and to generally erode market confidence in Yellow's ability to continue, all in service of gaining leverage as the Teamsters' negotiations with UPS unfolds. And what the American Prospect does in this article is really great, and then I'm going to come in with some more context from an article from the Lever News, which this is all really fascinating and important stuff if you actually want to understand what's happened with Yellow. The American Prospect says, left out of this narrative is the fact that phase 2 of One Yellow likely would have translated to job losses. Nor does the narrative try to explain why any union leader would deliberately vaporize 22,000 jobs from their own membership for any reason. And that's, the idea
that seems to be the most damning of all to me.
Yeah, if you're going to make the claim that a union president is eliminating 22,000 jobs purposely, you're going to have to come with some receipts for that, and they do not. Here's some other information from the American Prospect. Labor costs actually dropped for Yellow, despite their claims that the Teamsters Union was just too greedy. And that was according to the company's own latest 10K forms. In the 5 years through 2022, as Yellow's competitor Old Dominion Freight Line made $4 billion in profit, Yellow suffered more than $200 million in losses. This despite the declining percentage of labor costs. And it wasn't even just the non-union competitors that were doing well. Satish Jindal, who is a president of a transportation and logistics consulting group, told the New York Times that another Teamsters represented competitor also stayed afloat. And he reiterated, so this is not like just a union guy. This is a transportation and logistics consulting group, right? So this is not, when you hear those words, these are not the most labor-friendly people. He is saying that Yellow suffered largely because of mismanagement. And this mismanagement specifically is its string of acquisitions through the 2000s where they pitched subsidiaries that they acquired and then owned to compete against one another. Right? So these are multiple companies that Yellow is owning, and they're pitching them against each other, trying to make them compete with one another instead of trying to make them cooperate with one another. These acquisitions that were not taken full advantage of by continuing to make them compete. These acquisitions were fueled by additional debt that then needed to be refinanced, which increased the pressure to cut costs, which would be borne on the backs of its mostly Teamster-represented workforce. And that is important to underscore, as Sean O'Brien did in that clip, that not only were the Teamsters, not only is it just simply not true that the Teamsters were unwilling to make concessions, the Teamsters have made concessions, a bunch of concessions. Over the past 5 years, the Teamsters gave back what amounted to $5 billion in concessions to Yellow. $5 billion split between 22,000 employees. If you do the math, that is nearly $250,000 per employee over the past 5 years. Okay? So these workers have already sacrificed a lot for this company. More than the bosses have, certainly. They've sacrificed for this company. And additionally, they got a lot of loans to try to refinance and try to make things better that they were not able to capitalize on. And that's not the union's fault, because the workers are never asked about any of these financial decisions or management decisions or anything like that. Chris Townsend told the American Prospect that the author of the bankruptcy filing clearly does not understand how union contracts and negotiations work. He asserts that the union somehow understood and supported his One Yellow scheme, which was purported to save the company. This is a personal attempt by Doheny, the author of the bankruptcy filing, to absolve himself for a mess that he joined mid-mess and could not manage. The Teamsters General Secretary-Treasurer Fred Zuckerman had similar sentiments, the American Prospect reported. Quote, "When mismanaged companies like Yellow cry about needing more flexibility to modernize, they're telling you that they want to take advantage of workers." That's exactly right. It's important to understand. And so I mentioned loans a little bit ago. And it's interesting learning about the source of these loans, because the source of one of these loans, two big loans, came from Apollo Global Management and then the federal government. So, and Apollo Global Management is really set to get a lot of these financial assets. They're looking pretty as this bankruptcy goes through. So, backing up a little bit, Yellow received, this is from the Lever News, Yellow received a $700 million taxpayer-funded bailout from President Donald Trump in 2020, shortly before Apollo's co-founder and his wife donated $1 million to Trump's re-election campaign.
Pretty good return.
Pretty good return. And so though Trump constantly depicts himself as a pro-worker populist, his administration's bailout of Yellow was structured to permit Apollo to get paid back in a potential bankruptcy before the government. The result is that truckers now face mass layoffs, and taxpayers could see hundreds of millions of dollars in losses, all while the Trump donors' Wall Street firm benefits from a government-funded cushion. And the loan terms that the Trump administration gave to Yellow were actually even more generous than Yellow had sought. So Yellow sought a loan from the government, and the government gave them an even better deal than they asked for. That's according to Congressional Oversight Committee records that the Lever acquired and reviewed. Insane. And so it's important to understand, why would the government do this? Apollo has significant ties to the Trump administration. Let's take a look at them. The Lever, I mean, this is some fantastic reporting by the Lever. I'm a monthly donor to the Lever, and I mean, y'all should be too. It's really, really good reporting. You're not going to get this really anywhere else. The Lever and the American Prospect, some of the best national publications out there. In 2017, Apollo loaned $184 million to Kushner Companies, the family real estate firm of Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor, to refinance a mortgage on a Chicago skyscraper. That loan came after Apollo co-founder Joshua Harris started advising the White House on infrastructure policy. That's interesting. The Trump Securities and Exchange Commission, chaired by finance industry lawyer Jay Clayton, dropped an investigation into Apollo weeks after the company extended the loan to Kushner. After Trump left office, Clayton became the lead independent director of Apollo. Clayton, who, let's remember, was the chair of the Trump Securities and Exchange Commission, who is supposed to regulate the financial industry. Immediately after that position, he got a job at the top of Apollo. When the pandemic hit, Apollo co-founder and now CEO Mark Rowan contacted Trump administration's senior officials, including Kushner, seeking relaxed restrictions on a separate COVID relief program that could benefit Apollo. And then in September of 2020, Rowan and his wife donated $1 million to Trump Victory, a joint fundraising committee between Trump and the Republican National Committee. Apollo's third co-founder, Leon Black, was reportedly a personal acquaintance of Kushner. Black was recently accused of raping a young girl at now-deceased sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein's New York townhouse. Apollo and its subsidiaries spent $4.7 million lobbying the federal government in 2020, according to Open Secrets. Apollo partner John Bookout donated $85,000 to Trump Victory in the 2020 cycle. New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft, who served on the Apollo board until 2021, donated $1 million from his Kraft Group LLC to the Trump Inaugural Committee in late 2016. And former Senator Pat Toomey from Pennsylvania, one of 4 members of the COVID Congressional Oversight Commission, set up to oversee pandemic relief spending, joined Apollo's board in February after retiring from the Senate. The Oversight Commission's final report on yellow loans was released in June. So these are all the incestuous connections that Apollo had to the Trump administration, which I think we have every reason to believe is why the Trump administration would set up a loan such that they get compensated behind these financial industry ghouls and parasites. So there you go, folks. Yellow destroyed themselves. Management are the ones who killed Yellow, not the workers. And additionally, they got way more loans than they should have, and they weren't able to capitalize on it. So we are not here for blaming the workers at all. So we've got another guest. We got another couple of guests. These are going to be our last guests, and then we've got some more. We've got some stuff to review about the UAW that we are really excited about, and that is we are talking to Jacob Jones and Haley Zarnick. Are they both in the Zoom?
They are, yes.
Jacob Jones and Haley Zarnick. I asked them to come on the show today because, but the week before last, the Democratic Socialists of America, DSA, had their national convention, and the Alabama DSA chapters had a delegation, and they were both on this delegation, and they are both union members. And them both being union members and being part of the Alabama delegation meant that something like 20 or 30% of the Alabama delegation is union members. So we were really excited about that. And there were a lot of really cool stuff that DSA committed to do around labor in support of the labor movement. So we wanted to get them on to talk about that, union members in DSA who went to the national convention. So Haley, Jacob, thanks for joining the program. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having us. Excited to be here.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah, really looking forward to hearing more about it. So, Haley, you are from Birmingham. You're in Birmingham DSA. Jacob is in North Alabama DSA. And y'all actually have a labor committee down in Birmingham, Haley. Can you talk to us about what some of your priorities were going into this convention as a member of Birmingham DSA's labor committee?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. For me, it was a priority to have a national level direction because I think that we have been in the Birmingham area sort of supporting every campaign that we can, but not necessarily with an eye towards what our long-term goal is as the labor committee of Birmingham DSA is, right? It's easy to say, I want the Starbucks workers to win their union. I would, love for Amazon to have a successful campaign. But figuring out what it's going to take to really win worker power and build worker militancy is sort of something different from just showing up on a picket line. And I think we've found that out too by seeing how some of how some of these fights have played out, right? It was a pretty crushing end to the UMWA strike. Certainly have not seen our first union, Amazon union in Alabama, although they did inspire the Staten Island union, which is awesome. But I think for me, I was really excited to figure out what priorities the national level organization had. And I think we're coming out of the convention as an organization feeling really optimistic and having articulated a pretty clear vision. A couple of things that we've committed to are sort of recommitting to the rank and file strategy. So we know that union leaders don't always have the same views as the rank and file members, and we also know that we need more rank and file union members. And so part of what we try and do is get DSA members to join unions, and also make sure that we're in communication with as many union members as possible, not just folks that are, doing the press releases and on the news. And we've also committed to doing local EWOC formations. So if folks aren't familiar with EWOC, it's the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee. It's a pretty historic collaboration between the Electrical Workers Union and DSA to provide some extra support for folks who are trying to organize in places where they may not have, pre-existing unions or folks to talk to. And so that's part of how we got connected to the Starbucks fight here, is that folks were coming to DSA looking for support, as all of the incredible staff, Starbucks Workers United organizers, were absolutely overwhelmed with like hundreds of stores that were trying to get advice from them. So we got to be a little bit of extra support. And the goal of the local EWOCs would be to create smaller formations regionally that could do the same thing. So that's a bit of my ramble. Jacob, anything that I've missed there? Sorry to go on.
No, I think you hit everything at a pretty good level. And really, Birmingham DSA, y'all have been doing great work on the labor front. North Alabama, we're really just getting started. We came in with the Strike Ready campaign that was supporting the UPS workers. So we're a little new to the game, but we're coming on strong. And definitely all of the national priorities and everything, just supporting rank and file stuff, the emergency worker organizing, big priorities. We're going to integrate all of that in for North Alabama and build that into our labor committee from the start. So hopefully, we have a clear direction from the beginning to work from and bring people in to help assist.
So, Jacob, I think that I may be wrong, but I think you're a relatively newer member to DSA. And my understanding, viewing from afar, is that this convention was kind of uniquely unifying for the membership of DSA, and people left kind of more hopeful than they ever have following a convention. I actually remember people that I knew in DSA leaving the convention less hopeful and more dejected than they came to the convention. And a lot of some of the reasons that I've heard for that is the labor stuff. How do you feel? Does that kind of track with your experience, Haley?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I thought we were going to Jacob. But yeah, I think so for sure. This was my first convention. And I will tell you, I came in really anxious, particularly as a Southern organizer. I always worry that the vibe is going to be, folks in socialist strongholds sort of, quizzing me on how good my reading has been and whether or not my priorities align with theirs. And that's not even remotely what it was like. I had an amazing time. And so my anxiety very quickly sort of fell away as I got to meet a lot of my comrades for the first time in person. I thought it was incredible. I think we figured out a lot of the internal democracy and have a really, really solid, sort of structure for making sure that debate is heard. And people are committed to hearing that debate too, right? So there would be times where it seemed pretty clear that we had, a building consensus on something, but we wouldn't vote, to call the question and move on because there were still folks that wanted to speak against or wanted to speak for, even if that wasn't the consensus. And I think we're a much stronger organization when we hear those folks out. So I was really proud of that. How did you feel, Jacob? I my first convention, but I'm still fairly new, so I'm curious.
Yeah, obviously my first convention too. North Alabama DSA just became a recognized chapter at the beginning of this year. I came into DSA last year after the Dobbs decision. It just, I don't know, why, but that was the thing that just hit me. I was like, that's the first like recognizable thing to me after I've started like really paying attention, that kind of like, I was like, wow, that's an actual loss of rights. That's what can happen if you don't organize against this. And so I came in, just thrown to the wolves immediately because they're like, hey, you're saying stuff, so be the secretary. So yeah, I just kind of jumped in. And so coming off of that and getting us to chapter status, it was easiest for us to go and be the delegate. And I mean, we voted on it and everything. And so yeah, first time being there. And yeah, I would really say that the solidarity there was great, especially compared to what I've heard, and I heard at there by other people who had been delegates before. There were some very divisive ones in the past. I think 2019 was apparently particularly troubling. But I think in the midst of all the labor surge and everything, it really has been a unifying force in DSA, and it started seeming real and achievable. And I think it really brought people in, and coming off the back of some of the losses last summer and everything, like I mentioned, that brought me in. It just, everybody came with a good attitude of wanting to get things done and not being divisive. And I think that was really helpful. And yeah, on the debate side, we really came together, like just us all talking, let's hear these people out, let's debate. That's what we're here for. And there was, rarely, if ever, a time where we were like, all right, we're all filling the room here, like we're ready to vote on this. And in those cases, it was like a 99% yes vote. So it was really reassuring, really reaffirming of our cause, and yeah, great experience.
So Jacob, in your mind, what were some of the highlights on the labor side? What were some of the resolutions and commitments that DSA made around that issue that you're most excited about?
Yeah, definitely the recommitment to the rank and file stuff, like Haley mentioned, and also the emergency organizing, just because whenever it's nice to know that National's committed to that, because it can feel a little bit like you're twisting out in the wind when you don't have like it feels like every chapter is just kind of, they got their own different approach to things. There's no real consensus on the right approach, and just kind of coming to that, I guess, democratic centralism or whatever approach to things, or whatever, where we voted on this and this is the way forward. It's just really like empowered. We have a real direction, and having direction is a large part of the battle. And yeah, we know where we're gonna support and what we're gonna build into our support structure.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I think that unifying around labor has been useful for us beyond just thinking about what we want to win for workers in their workplace. I think our main lever of power as workers to get, for instance, talking about Dobbs, to make sure that our reproductive rights are protected, is through our unions, right? If we build strong fighting unions, it's not just about what we can get in that contract. It's also about what we can fight to get our workplaces to do more broadly in terms of, our greater landscape of rights. And so I think that's something that was woven through a lot of different pieces of or different resolutions, I guess, that we considered. And so, yeah, I think that is a huge reason why we were so unified at this convention, is that we're starting to see ourselves as workers, and really claim that power, not as outside organizers. And I think that's something we've struggled with in our labor committee when it comes to Starbucks, UMWA, Amazon, is we're here to support, we're here to do whatever you can, but we're not here as workers in our workplaces to, exercise our strongest lever of power. And so I think that's a shift that we're making that's really positive. Is yes, we want to continue to show up on picket lines. Yes, we want to provide whatever fundraising or support we can for folks that are, not in our workplaces, that are taking awesome actions to organize. But we also want to really, really recognize our power as workers.
did the DSA Labor Commission, do they have a full-time paid organizer now?
Yes.
Yes.
Got Amanda Weems, who is incredible, from Texas, and she's come down to visit us. We've also just passed a resolution to have national political leadership full-time, which will be huge, because I think a lot of times what happens is the messaging gets out based on whoever has the easiest access to the press. And so having actual full-time paid staff that can, make sure that our viewpoints are being represented in a way that makes sense is exciting. So yeah, we've got our labor organizer, and we've got more staff incoming, which we're really excited about, I think.
Love that the labor organizer comes from the South. That's really cool.
Oh yeah.
And so one of y'all's priorities going forward, or the next big kind of national campaign, is going to be of course, y'all are still standing ready to support through your Strike Ready campaign, UPS workers if they vote down this contract and they end up going on a strike. But the organization hasn't taken a stance on whether UPS workers should vote yes or no, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. We leave that with the workers.
And so the next big national campaign that you can definitely predict is going to be the Strike Ready campaign to support the UAW workers as they go to a potential strike on September the 14th. What is that gonna entail? What are y'all gonna be doing in that campaign?
That's a great question. We're still thinking about it. So we, to give a little background on the Strike Ready campaign, that came directly out of the UPS contract negotiations. So I'm sure all of your listeners know they've been, in negotiations for some time. There were plans to potentially strike, and we're now in the process of voting on a tentative agreement. And so as we sort of wait to see how that shakes out, we are, I think, in a holding pattern to figure out where a lot of our energy is going to go. But I imagine that a lot of what we've decided to do for the UPS Strike Ready campaign will carry over to UAW. And so that's just making sure we're visible, right? So something that Chris with our chapter did is print out little like Strike Ready cards and getting people to sign it. I think a lot of other chapters did that as well. So, making sure that people can see that we're together in solidarity with them, but also getting ready to figure out where the picket lines are, making contact with organizers so that we've got those relationships, figuring out where we can fundraise and where those funds will be most appropriately spent. All of those kinds of things are ways that we can actually support as outside organizers. We have also tried to get folks to, for instance, work for UPS, but after a certain amount of time, right, they're no longer able to vote anyways. Right. So I don't know the timing on UAW, but theoretically, that's always a possibility as well.
Yep. And, even if you're not, obviously, if you go work for UPS today, you're not going to be able to vote on the tentative agreement, but there's going to be a big, my understanding is that in the Teamsters, there's going to be a big campaign to enforce the contract after it's implemented and hold local bosses accountable. And so even if you're not going to be able to vote on the tentative agreement, there's still a lot of work to do as a Teamster in UPS to make sure that because UPS bosses violate the contract all the time, is my understanding, and bosses everywhere in any union workplace. So you got to be you got to be active even outside of contract negotiations. And in fact, honestly, that's as or more important because it's just like an election season. People are more likely to be activated during contract negotiations, just like during election season. And so when you're outside of those, when you're outside of those kind of peaks of activity, the valleys, it's that much more important to have watchdogs. So definitely, if you're in DSA and you're thinking about joining UPS, working at UPS, don't not work for UPS because the contract negotiations are over.
And I'd say the same thing for Starbucks too, right? Is, you get part of the struggle with the legal framework that we have set up for labor rights in this country is that it creates a lot of loopholes for people to join and create a recognized union. And so I think a lot of our sort of militant labor energy gets sucked up trying to prove to the NLRB that yes, we have a union that meets whatever criteria you've set out for our bargaining unit. And there's a whole lot that comes after that, right? Like that's not the building power part. That's just literally proving to the NLRB like we count based on your definitions. And so there's so much more to do after that. And I think it's really, really difficult sometimes to maintain momentum when you're like, well, we got the win we were going for. Now what?
Right.
And so, yeah, it's really important.
Yeah, fun fact, nothing happens after you win a union election, basically.
Exactly.
You win a union election, you don't get a raise, you don't get health benefits, you don't get more time off. You got to win a contract for that. So that's
you get
once
another
you win
fight.
a union
That's
election, you're ready to fight is the
Exactly.
Yeah.
Haley, Jacob, really appreciate y'all taking the time. Was really excited about having union members represent Alabama at the DSA National Convention. Is there anything else that you think would be important to share with our listeners?
If you're listening and you haven't joined DSA yet, I would say you should join, especially if you're in North Alabama. We could use a lot of help. Oh, in Birmingham, sorry.
Absolutely. Well, I'm in Tuscaloosa and part of the Birmingham chapter, so I will throw that out there. I think that we've also really concretized our electoral strategy in a way that is increasingly independent, which is very exciting to me because I have not seen Alabama Democrats support the labor movement. And so for folks who feel like they would like to see some stronger, voices in our electoral politics, I also think that DSA is becoming increasingly a political home for folks who feel shut out by Democrats and by Republicans. So I would just echo that. We welcome folks to join. We're looking forward to building a strong socialist movement in Alabama.
Haley, Jacob, thanks for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
All right, so I mentioned the UAW, and we're going to talk about that because last week we talked about Shawn Fain's the members' demands that he presented to the big three automakers, including Stellantis. And so this week he has gotten some of the responses to the members' demands. And folks, they are not great. They're not great. So he went on a live stream on Tuesday of last week and talked about and read off from the company proposal what they wanted their workers to have to go through. So let's play this first clip of Shawn Fain.
Stellantis has passed over a list of initial proposals that are riddled with givebacks. It's amazing to me that I open this first page here, and the first highlighted item here is absenteeism. You know, it's a pathetic irony that Carlos Tavares can't bother to show up to bargaining, and that Mark Stewart, CEO, was late showing up to the first opening of bargaining. And as they move forward, they want to talk about absenteeism with our workers. Another part of this, we have to reflect about, we hear about absenteeism all the time, and this is something that really pisses me off when I hear these companies keep beating this to death. We are the most overworked country in the world. Our members, our workers in the United States put in more hours than any country in the world.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's important. So that point that he said about absenteeism is very important. And they put out some numbers about that. And so Stellantis said, or maybe it was GM, they said, we have lost, get ready for this, it's a big number, $217 million because of absenteeism. And so, wow, you hear that number and you think, man, that is a lot of money that Stellantis claims to have lost. That's crazy. And so the thing that you should do after that, if you are, remotely inquisitive or critical of bosses, is I wonder what their revenue was. And actually, if you take a look at their revenue, I can't remember what the number was. It was some billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue. And so if you divide that $200 million that they claim to have lost, which, I mean, that's just a claim. That could just be a lie. But even if we take it at face value, if you divide that by their total revenue, they lost 0.08% of their total revenue to absenteeism, quote unquote. And so that's a silly thing to be concerned about if you are the big three. But to the extent that absenteeism is an issue, one of the reasons for absenteeism, it would be because they pay so many of their temporary and second-tier workers so much less. For example, the starting wage at Ultium, which is a battery manufacturer, is $16 an hour with a top out of $20 an hour after 7 years. Okay? So, you make that little money without, and that's as a temporary employee, and you make that little money without all the benefits, then maybe, you're going to be absent sometimes, right? You're maybe not going to be as motivated to come to work, reasonably so. And and then obviously you got to take into account, exactly like Shawn Fain said, American workers put in more hours every week than any other industrialized country. And we have got to turn that back. We've got to take back more freedom from the boss because we have allowed them to steal too much of our time. So we have to take it back, and Shawn Fain is really kind of leading the charge. The Teamsters, there were, like I said, there were a lot of wins, but they really, there were some things that were left on the table, and I think that time off is a big thing that they really didn't fight that much for. And Shawn Fain is coming out swinging for a 32-hour work week for 40 hours of pay, and that's really important. That's doable, and they deserve it. And additionally, when they're talking about absenteeism, he mentioned that the CEO did not show up to the initial bargaining, and the COO was late to the initial bargaining. And then after the initial bargaining, the COO, Mark Stewart, went to his second home in Mexico, where he has been for the last 2 weeks, where he has sent letters to the UAW telling them in the negotiations that they should be, quote, focusing on reality. So I don't think it's realistic for these executives to make tens of millions of dollars and have second homes and have the time during negotiations to take 2-week vacations. I don't think that's realistic, frankly. Anyway, let's go to the second clip from Shawn Fain. There's some more that Stellantis is wanting to take from these people.
And a sad reality of this and what they proposed, rather than taking seriously our demand to eliminate tiers, Stellantis proposed the creation of new ones. When I flow through here, instead of getting to work on negotiating the significant wage gains of our members that they've earned and deserve, Stellantis is threatening our profit-sharing formula. We propose the reestablishment of retiree medical benefits for all workers. Stellantis has proposed cuts to our existing medical coverage. We propose more paid time off for workers to spend with their family and friends. Stellantis has proposed the elimination of the holiday conversion option, fewer vacation days for new hires, and less choice of when we can take vacation. They've also proposed to expand their right to force members to work overtime. Stellantis has proposed cuts to their 401k contribution, gutting the transfer rights based on seniority. They've also proposed eliminating the moratorium on outsourcing. They've also proposed to eliminate the cap on the use of temporary employees, and have disrespected our trades with proposals that would make it easier to outsource more of our work. Stellantis even had the nerve to demand the unilateral right to demand further concessions during the life of the contract and for the union to allow the company to make those changes without a vote of our membership.
That is some pretty galling proposals from the company. Again, let's remember, in years of record profits, we talked about when Shawn Fain introduced his members' demands, he went over the company's profits and talked about how they have literally never made more money. Never made more money in the history of the company. And in this time of record profits, they are still trying to take from the employees. I've got one more clip of these proposals from Stellantis, so let's get that.
Just a few more things I highlighted. Increase the number of pay periods required to work for full vacation entitlement. So now, not just the 26 weeks you got to get in a year. They want you to work more weeks to qualify for your full vacation allotment. They want to create a no-fault-based absenteeism system where they can punish workers more. Company has the ability to schedule mandatory vacation shutdowns without restriction on duration, timing, notice, and cancellation criteria. They want to reduce the company's notification requirements for modifying shift start times. They want to enable supervisors to perform bargaining unit work. But, the biggest one to me was this issue about adding a new letter establishing the ability to reopen and bargain provisions of our agreements that don't require ratification.
Yeah. Crazy stuff here by management of Stellantis. And Shawn Fain reacted reasonably to these proposals. Let's see what he did.
Well, I'll tell you what, brothers and sisters, when we get things like this from the company and they want to sit there and talk about they're not asking for concessions or looking for concessions, everything they're looking for in this document is about concessions. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do with their proposal. I'm going to file it in its proper place, because that's where it belongs, the trash, because that's what it is.
All right, there we go. I liked that little animation that Joe did. But that's exactly right. That's where that belongs. It's the gall of them to try to steal more money from these people after so long of these workers giving concessions. Shawn Fain also did a live stream with Bernie on Thursday night, I believe it was, with a couple of UAW members. And one woman talked about how they have these periods of 90 days. The company is allowed to call to call these periods in 90 days where they have to work every day without a day off for 90 days, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day for 90 days. And you can't take off or take a day off, go to church, take your, anything that happens with your kids. You can't go to it. You can't take time off or you'll be reprimanded and disciplined, potentially terminated. 90 days. I mean, that's insane. And they're wanting more authority to take time away from people. It's just disgusting, really, what's going on with these companies, and we're looking forward to seeing the UAW win these, whether they have to strike or not. They obviously deserve every single thing that they're asking for. So we're going to continue to talk about that as these negotiations continue. And last week we showed you a clip of Jim Cramer. Last week we showed you a clip of Jim Cramer reacting to Shawn Fain's members' demands, his presentation of the members' demands. And so he again reacted to Shawn Fain this week, where he reacted to Shawn Fain throwing Stellantis' proposal in the trash. And he continues like wetting the bed about this kind of stuff. I don't doubt that he wakes up in a cold sweat thinking about yelling Shawn Fain's name. I mean, it's crazy. This guy has clearly, Fain is living rent-free in this guy's head. Let's take a look at what Jim Cramer said last week on CNBC.
I want you to compare the labor negotiations here to the ones in auto, where I think there's going to be a strike, and I think it's going to be horrible.
You're making that call
September
today?
14th. I think they're going to strike. Shawn Fain, the guy who runs the UAW, I find him frightening.
And Teamsters UPS didn't give you any solace.
Teamsters turned out to be get a good deal.
If I can get
Teamsters historically very powerful union, rich union.
Yeah, and notice how he said, I'm scared of Shawn Fain. This UAW is frightening, and that's why they're going to go on strike. No. That's not what's going to happen. If they go on strike, it's going to be because these companies are not respecting the people who produce the value, who create the value that these people are stealing. That's why they would go on strike. They're not going to go on strike because, this UAW is scary. Shawn Fain is scary. If they go on strike, it's going to be because the big three are not respecting their workers and not giving them what they deserve. That's what he should be saying. That should be his message, because UAW members are not listening to this weirdo on CNBC, right? It's a business network. Who is his audience? The UAW executives. They have all the power in the world to prevent a strike. They've just got to give the UAW what they're asking for, and there'd be no reason for a strike. They're going to be the ones who strike themselves if a strike happens. But he's trying to place the blame on the workers. Let's continue.
But the UAW leader won. There was a very contested vote between the company, the union that wants to work with the autos together, to try to preserve some jobs and give the elder people a good pay. And then this man, Shawn, who is just talking about capitalism and the nature of capitalism and how it's really hurt workers. This is very Walter Reuther language. It's the kind of language that when we had in this country, we'll take you down if you don't play ball. That's the language I'm hearing from UAW. Yep. And look, I mean, it's the kind of language where you just say, you know what, we should have built all our EVs in Mexico. It's that bad. I don't think people are paying enough attention. The man is, I'm not saying he's irrational. I'm saying he was elected in order to make it so that there's a very short week to find benefit back. And then
See, I mean, the idea, he was just astonished at the idea that workers would have security in their retirement. You know, that's totally reasonable.
Shocking.
Every worker should have security in their retirement. We should not be left at the whims of the market when we retire. But that's what he wants. That's what he wants. There was another guy that we played a clip of last week that we have learned some more about in the week since from our friends over at Left Reckoning, Matt Leck and David Griscom. And it's pretty funny stuff considering what their commentary on the UPS workers. I'm talking about Patrick Bet-David, and you'll remember that he was so just appalled at the idea that UPS workers would make $49 an hour. And now he said that today the average UPS worker makes $49 an hour, which is not true. The $49 an hour figure is what UPS drivers will be making at the top of the progression after 4 or 5 years at the end of the contract in 2028. So, you know, I mean, this guy is, in addition to being a ghoul, is just no research, not interested in actually being correct on anything. But, and, you know, so we commented on how one of the things that we said was that the idea that somebody like him in a position like his would be criticizing people who actually have a productive job, who actually contribute to society. The idea that they get paid much while he is a literal professional opinion haver, right? And so there's, I think most people would consider that absurd, but it's even more absurd than that, and Matt Leck is going to talk about it here. Let's listen to that.
I will say I find it, there's a little bit of, to me it's like financial services, whatever, you're buying and selling. And I don't want somebody who makes a lot of money buying and selling telling the people who actually make the things that are being bought and sold how much they deserve. I think you should shut the fuck up and be happy with what you're broken off with. But it turns out that it's actually maybe even a little bit darker than that, because as I shared the name Parasite Bet-David, more and more people are saying it. People got into my mentions with, actually, he's an MLM guy.
Oh, hell yeah.
I found that my ears pricked up.
Fight for your family.
There's a guy, CoffeeZilla. I believe this is excerpted clips of a CoffeeZilla expose of PBD, and they had like the whole back and forth. This person, Owolabi Aziz, did a sort of breakdown of it. So I just want to share a little bit of this, and I'll just repeat what I said. Like, Parasite. You talk about people that are working fucking hard, man, and you're going to go in your air-conditioned studio. Look, I do this for a living. I'm not about to come and say the guy who delivered this needs to be paid less. Okay? Anyway.
Yeah, and so then they play this video from CoffeeZilla. I'd recommend y'all going and watching Left Reckoning's video and then CoffeeZilla's video. But they just explain how one of the primary ways that he made his money was by setting up this scheme to get people to be, quote, life insurance salespeople. And so you had to pay like $250 to get the life insurance, and then you had to pay more money to take this test to become a licensed life insurance salesperson. And one of the people who did this talked in this video about how when I was studying for this test, the people who told him to take the test were constantly telling him, you know, hey, you don't worry about studying too hard for this. You only have to make 60%. You really don't, you know, it really doesn't matter. You just got to make 60% and then you'll be able to pass and you can be a life insurance salesman and all this. And they just did not set them up to succeed. And the reason was that it was set up like a pyramid scheme. So every life insurance salesperson that you signed up, you got like a cut of of how much they paid to be a life insurance salesman, and on and on. And so it is really parasitic kind of stuff that he made his money on. And so, you know, I mean, the gall of somebody who made their money like that to criticize people who work for a living is pretty astounding. I sent I sent them a note on their website saying that I would be willing to come on the show and talk to them, and that their audience might be interested. It might be a nice change of pace for their audience to hear from a worker, somebody who has been elected to represent workers instead of just podcasters and politicians. So, you know, not really holding my breath, but if he pays for me to fly out to Miami, I'm more than willing to go.
I don't blame you. We'll stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned. We'll keep you posted, folks. We've got one more clip, but do we need to wrap, Adam? I know that you've got stuff to do this afternoon.
Yeah. What you got? What were you wanting to talk about?
It'll be quick, and it's this Jonah Goldberg clip on CNN. Jonah Goldberg.
Oh no, not Jonah Goldberg.
He's a Republican. But he's
among other things.
Yeah, among other things. But he's a reasonable Republican.
Is that what they're calling them?
That's what they're calling them. Never Trumpers. You know, they want to, you know, drink your blood from your skull, but they're not going to send mean tweets. Is basically, you know, that's these people. And so he was on CNN talking about the scourge of small dollar donors in political races. This is just a fascinating thing that I have never heard anybody have the audacity to say on TV. Like, people heard him say this. He said this knowing people were listening to him. It's just amazing. So let's listen to what he had to say on CNN, on TV, where people could hear him.
All right, let's hope this is the right one.
But I just also think that we were dealing with a time where there were a lot of people, there was a lot of cheering and self-congratulation about the rise of small donors a decade ago. And now small donors are actually one of the biggest problems for democracy, for the GOP, because large donors actually
did he say,
have a strategic view about moderation, who can win, who can't.
And then you're going to
small
want to
donors really are just venting their spleen with their credit card.
Bits of gold.
Yeah,
you heard him right. He said that one of the biggest threats to democracy is small dollar donors.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's a take, right? There's, you know, that's an opinion that
that's a hot take.
That because we live in America, he is entitled to. So, you know, happy for the First Amendment, but it also produces some trash.
Yeah, I want to hear his rationale here.
Yeah. So let's rewind it so we make sure we get that, because we talked over some gold there that you're going to love.
A lot of people, there was a lot of cheering and self-congratulation about the rise of small donors a decade ago. And now small donors are actually one of the biggest problems for democracy, for the GOP, because large donors actually have a strategic view about moderation, who can win, who can't. Small donors really are just venting their spleen with their credit card, and they lock candidates into positions that can hurt them in a general election.
Such an important point.
Such an important point.
I just also
by CNN. That's the CNN host. CNN, I thought, was supposed to be the libs. Wild.
Well, it's because you don't think with a strategic view.
Yeah, right. I'm not moderate enough. And that's why I shouldn't be allowed to donate to campaign. I mean, what is even the solution to that, right? If small dollar donors are a problem, presumably he thinks there should be a solution.
Well, if I had big dollars, I'd be a big dollar donor. Right. There's a solution. He could give me some money.
Yeah.
And I could donate, strategically
for him.
Yeah. What would even be the solution to that? Like, you can only donate in increments of $5,000 to campaigns. I mean, what's the deal? What's the thing that he wants to happen here to make it more difficult for working people to fund candidates that they want to see elected? That's just that's a really kind of mask off moment, right? Another example of just contempt that these people have for people like us. If we're not in the elite, if we don't live in DC or New York or California, and we don't have a fancy finance or media job, then we shouldn't have a vote. We shouldn't be able to spend money on elections. We got to leave that stuff to our betters, right? Because they know more than us. The people that run the world, who make money because they have money, they just know more than us. And that's why it's a meritocracy, don't you know? That's why they're at the top, is because they're better than us.
Such an important point.
That's really wild. I could not believe that, because I was watching that clip on Twitter, and I was already, my jaw was at the floor by the end of his statement. And then it just got dislocated when the CNN host chimed in. Such an important point. I could not believe that. Although I don't know why I was so surprised, but, you would think that they would at least have to try to keep up some sort of veneer of being, like, liberal or at least moderate. At least I'm not a total insane ghoul, bought and paid for by corporations. But it be what it be, I guess. So that's it. That's all I had to say. That's the last clip. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about, Adam?
No. How about that?
All right. Yeah, we had scheduled a comedian to come on today, to come in studio today, and it didn't work out. The plans kind of fell apart, and today would have been a really good day to have a comedian on board, I think. But we always have next time. So, folks, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up. We appreciate y'all listening. Make sure you find us online, TVLR.fm. Bookmark that page. Sign up for our newsletter. Buy our new merch. We're gonna be closing pre-orders on that new Join a Union shirt soon. So buy it. TVLR.fm/merch. If you're not a monthly donor to the program, please consider doing that if you're financially able. TVLR.fm/donate. Become a monthly automatic recurring donor. And that'll help us keep the show on the air and keep paying our people and keep doing what we do. So, I think that's it. With that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. We'll see you next week, folks. Thanks for listening.